Chapter 36-23. The Abyssal Prefect glanced at the Heaven Punisher and sent a telepathic message to summon the little devil. When the little demon came, his face was full of unhappiness. "Who is it that wants to see this young master?" "Young master?" Ning Shu looked at the little demon. He was a lot taller than before. Previously, he was 5 or 6 years old. Now, he was 8 or 9 years old. His body was starting to shrink. Previously, he still had some baby fat, but now his face was thin. He gave off the feeling of an elegant youth. His Excellency pointed at Ning Shu and Fu Tian. "They want to see you. Let's talk." The little demon looked at Ning Shu and then looked at Fa Tian. He didn't call himself young master anymore. Instead, he said, "Why are you looking for me?" Ning Shu said with a smile, "This is your brother. I brought him to see you. In the future, when we are familiar with each other, you two brothers can get to know each other." The little demon raised his eyebrows. What the hell? Another one was born in the world of reincarnation? In such a remote and small world of reincarnation, it was a waste to have him alone. Unexpectedly, there were 2 of them. It was unreasonable. Ning Shu said. "No, he is a weapon. He just transformed." The little demon let out a sigh of relief. He raised his chin and said to Fa Tian, "In the future, you are my little brother. I will protect you." Fa Tian hid behind Ning Shu and looked at the little demon timidly. Ning Shu said, "He still doesn't understand what you are saying. He can't speak and is shy with strangers. As his older brother, you should be more lenient to him." The little demon said directly, "I am not so stingy as to bicker with a child." The little demon was also a child now. It was a bit funny to hear him say such words. His Excellency took out a bone from the box. It was the bone of a human hand. It was lustrous like jade. It didn't look like a human bone, but something made of jade. "What is your name? Come here." His Excellency asked Fa Tian. When Fa Tian saw the item in His Excellency's hand, he immediately understood what was going on. He stepped on the stairs that were covered in white bones and walked in front of His Excellency. The Abyssal Prefect placed his cold, pale hand on the child's shoulder and gave it a squeeze. He shook his head and said, "Such a good child shouldn't be with such a person." "Ning Shu, what are you talking about?" His Excellency handed the finger to Fa Tian, and Fa Tian took it and smiled sweetly at His Excellency. "Uncle." The Abyssal Prefect narrowed his eyes and reached out to touch Fa Tian's face. Fa Tian received the item and stepped on white bones to return to Ning Shu's side. He placed the item into the meson space in front of his chest. Ning Shu saw that the Abyssal Prefect had given the child something, and she also saw the little demon. As a return gift, she should also give something to the little demon. She didn't seem to care much about the little demon's cultivation, and it was always the Abyssal Prefect who looked after them. The little devil was the product of his world of samsara. His conscience suddenly hurt. Ning Shu asked the little demon, "How's your cultivation going? What kind of resources do you need? Do you want energy bodies?" When the iceberg melted, he would give 1 or 2 pieces to the little demon. The little demon said directly, "I don't want them. You can keep them for him." The little demon didn't like Ning Shu's things and told Ning Shu not to worry. Ning Shu, well, in the little demon's heart, she was a poor ghost. Ning Shu Chao asked, "Does this child need an energy body for his cultivation?" The Abyssal Prefect nodded. "Yes, absorbing high-level energy is good for cultivation." Ning Shu said, "Oh. Then I'll send some over after the iceberg melts." She didn't know if the Abyssal Prefect would get a share of the harvest this time. Logically speaking, he was here to help, so he should get a few energy bodies. Even she was able to get an iceberg. Although it was the smallest one and had the least amount of things inside, she still managed to get some. The abyssal prefect should also get some and would probably give it to the little demon. But the abyssal prefect was the abyssal prefect, and what she gave was what she gave. There was a difference. Ning Shu felt that it was inappropriate to just leave it alone. In the future, the little demon would take care of the world of samsara for her. She could be considered one of them. The abyssal prefect said to the little demon, "Take him to the backyard to see the flowers. I have something to say to him." Ning Shu, see the flowers planted by the abyssal prefect? The abyssal prefect was now a stay-at-home dad, raising and teaching children. Ning Shu forgot that he used to be a gardener, planting all kinds of flowers, watering them with souls and raising them with the corpses of all kinds of creatures. As for what the flowers would look like, there was no need to mention it. The little demon said to Fa Tian, "Let's go, I'll take you to see the flowers." Fa Tian hid behind Ning Shu. The little demon didn't force him. Ning Shu said. Chapter 36-24. Fa Tian grabbed Ning Shu's skirt and swayed left and right. He pouted, obviously not wanting to let Ning Shu leave. Tears were in his eyes. His tears flowed down. Ning Shu wiped his tears and felt helpless. It seemed that this child couldn't leave her for a while. Ning Shu said, "That's okay, I'll teach you." If he didn't do missions, then he would do other things, such as dealing with star stones or going for a stroll in the void. And even if he went personally, it would take some time. He would go find Li Wen. Li Wen was now a technology fanatic and couldn't extricate himself from science. Then he would slow down on missions. Right now, Heaven Punisher needed to be looked after and taught. Little Rat returned to the system space with a bunch of grape-like fruits in his hand. He threw them to Locken and said, "These are the fruits I found for you. I picked them secretly, and I almost got my head blown off. Don't say that I'm not good to you." Little Mouse stood up straight and put his paws on his waist. He really looked like an elder. Now, whenever Fa Tian received something, he would call him uncle. Little Mouse was very happy when he heard this, but he tried to hide it. "It's just a little thing. If you like it, I'll pick it for you next time." Was it a legend? I stole grapes to raise you. He probably stole them from other races. Ning Shu said, "Don't sneak around and provoke other races." Little Mouse snorted and picked a crystal-clear grape for Fa Tian. "Try it." Fa Tian opened his mouth and ate one. It was probably very sweet. Fa Tian's eyes narrowed and he ate happily. Ning Shu also wanted to try and was about to pick one, but Little Mouse patted the back of his hand. "You're so greedy. It's not like I picked it for you." Fa Tian immediately plucked a grape and brought it to Ning Shu's mouth. Ning Shu opened his mouth and took a bite. The grape had a rich and sweet juice, and with one bite, the juice burst. It was very satisfying. The most important thing was that it was rich in energy, and it was similar to the power of an energy body, a very gentle power. However, the power was very weak. If one tried to sense it carefully, they would not be able to sense it. After being eaten by Ning Shu, the little mouse was very unhappy. He carried the bunch of grapes and went to the other side with Fa Tian. Fa Tian still wanted to help Ning Shu, but he was stopped by Little Mouse. Ning Shu said, "You guys eat. I'm not eating." Although he was tempted, he could still hold it in. One of the mice finished a bunch of grapes by himself. Ning Shu stood at the side and watched them finish the grapes. She didn't get to eat another one. Fa Tian burped, reached out and patted Little Mouse, and smiled at him. The main system notified Ning Shu to deal with the star stones and change shifts with the people in Area A. Fa Tian was very sensitive. He sensed that Ning Shu was about to leave. He immediately tugged at Ning Shu's skirt like an abandoned puppy. Ning Shu thought about it and brought Fa Tian with him. When Fa Tian's mind matured, he could find something to do on his own. Ning Shu held Fa Tian's hand and appeared in the broken plane. He handed over the work to the people who dealt with the star stones. Ning Shu said to Fa Tian, "Stay by my side and don't walk around." She felt like a bitter mother who had to work and take care of her child. Fa Tian obediently stayed by her side. Ning Shu thought about it and gave Fa Tian some toys to play with. While Fatian was fiddling with the toys, Ning Shu had to keep talking to him while dealing with the star stones. Ning Shu was probably the only one who brought his family to deal with the star stones. Ning Shu was probably the only one. All the big shots present looked over, and those who had some connections came over to ask what was going on with this child. Ning Shu didn't hide the child's identity. Hearing that he was a weapon, some people looked envious. Some people looked like they wanted to eat shit. Just like the giant gate star now. Seeing this ignorant child, he felt pity. This child could have been the power of the faction, but now he had fallen into the hands of someone else. Their faction had nurtured this treasure for a long time and spent a lot of effort. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been able to transform so easily. The giant gate star didn't look at the child. He turned around to pick up the pieces, but his cheeks were grinding. What a pity. His heart was bleeding. Some big shots casually gave some things to Fa Tian. These big shots had lived for a long time and collected many good treasures. Even if they were given casually, they were things that some low-level mission takers couldn't get. Fa Tian received the things and kept calling Fa Tian uncle. A big shot reached out and patted Fa Tian's head. It was not easy for an innate cardinal treasure like this to transform into a human. Chapter 36-25. Mo Ming patted Fa Tian's head and said to Ning Shu, "You have to take care of yourself." Ning Shu was stunned and asked, "Why do you say that? Is someone trying to harm me?" Mo Ming shook his head. "That's not it. You know why these people are so nice to Fa Tian. Some of them are not even related to you, but they will still give Fa Tian some small things. The difference is whether it's more expensive or more ordinary." Ning Shu raised his eyebrows and asked, "Why is that?" These big shots treated Fa Tian rather well. Even the giant gate planet, who was so aggrieved, still gave Fa Tian a small thing. This child is a weapon after all. Even if he turns into a human, he's still a weapon. Since he's a weapon, he needs to be used. If a person uses a weapon, the weapon will be used. In the organization, there are actually weapons that can transform. If something happens to the owner, the transformed weapon will choose a new owner. At this time, making your presence known in front of the weapon is also to form good karma. After all, who knows what will happen in the future? After all, transformed weapons are considered the organization's strength. No matter who has them, they are the organization's strength. Ning Shu snorted. These old men were very bad. They could not openly take her god-beating whip, so they took a roundabout route. Of course, this also meant that these people did not want to be enemies with him. It didn't matter. No matter what the reason was, all he had to do was to accept the gifts that the heavens had given him. No matter what, these people had given him a gift, so he should be grateful. As for waiting for her to die, he would continue to wait. He would probably have to wait until the end of time. Ning Shu said to Mo Ming, "Thank you for the reminder. I know what to do." It seemed that Fa Tian's position in the organization would not be low in the future. Compared to an annoying mission enforcer like her, Fa Tian was obviously much more popular. She was really inferior to her son. If someone tried to secretly attack him, Ning Shu would break their claws. If she had done something before she died, it wouldn't have been so easy to get Fa Tian. He didn't expect Fa Tian to avenge him, but he wanted to make sure that Fa Tian wouldn't choose such a person. And even if she died, a new will of death would be born, although it would be a new Ning Shu. Therefore, Ning Shu was not flustered at all. Ning Shu looked around and saw that Zhu Menxing was looking at Fa Tian with a complicated expression. His eyes were filled with grief, as if his own child had acknowledged a thief as his father. He was heartbroken. Seeing Ning Shu's eyes, Zhu Menxing looked away inside. Ning Shu snorted at the Great Gate Star. He was clearly threatening the Great Gate Star. Zhu Menxing's face darkened. He walked away, not looking at Ning Shu and Fa Tian. If the Great Gate Star was not honest, she could test the power of the god-beating whip after it transformed. It was probably a qualitative leap. He wanted to test it and hoped that the Great Gate Star would cause trouble. If the Great Gate Star didn't cause trouble, Ning Shu wouldn't cause trouble either. Sigh, disappointing. He couldn't take the initiative to cause trouble. If others didn't offend him, he wouldn't offend them. Ning Shu looked at Mo Ming. Mo Ming was wearing a military green uniform and looked very dignified. When he squatted and talked to Fa Tian, he looked like a man of steel. Mo Ming, who used to be sick and couldn't even walk, was now holding his head high and looking powerful and dignified. For people like Mo Ming, reincarnation was a complete waste and burden. If his body couldn't bear such a heavy fate, Mo Ming would always be sick. He didn't have a normal body at all. Now, Mo Ming didn't have the shackles of a body, which was better. Ning Shu said to Mo Ming, "You've been promoted so quickly. Now you're by," and he sighed. Mo Ming just shook his head. "It's okay. I asked the general to let me follow you. I heard that you have a child, so I came to see you." That's humble. She didn't know how many lifetimes Mo Ming had accumulated such good fortune in his previous life and the life before that to have such good fate. He was probably some savior of the world. The speed of his promotion was really like a rocket. She thought about how she had to painstakingly complete missions from world to world. She climbed up step by step. She was a snail, and he was an eagle. There were differences between people. But if she didn't work hard, she might not even be as good as Mo Ming now. She was working hard, but it didn't mean that Mo Ming wasn't working hard. Mo Ming probably worked hard to get to where he was now. There was nothing to be unsatisfied about. Mo Ming said a few words to Ning Shu and left. Ning Shu continued to deal with the star stones. Fa Tian played with his toys obediently at the side. Ning Shu wanted to teach him how to speak. He couldn't just keep calling him uncle. Calling these old men uncle was a loss. Who knew how old these people were? Calling them uncle was too young. Fa Tian spoke with Ning Shu with difficulty. The speed and pronunciation of his speech were not very correct, but Ning Shu encouraged him and didn't scold him. Even if he was angry, he couldn't show it. Teaching children to do homework was probably the most painful thing in life. He was so angry that he was about to have a heart attack. Fa Tian was also a child. After learning from Ning Shu for a while, he couldn't concentrate. He played with the toys in his hands and stopped learning to speak with Ning Shu. Ning Shu was melancholic. "My child can't be a fool. He's definitely not a retard." Ning Shu suppressed his anger. It wasn't easy to learn to be an uncle. Who knew, he might call his name tomorrow. Ning Shu gritted his teeth as he dealt with the star stones. He held Fa Tian's hand for a long time. Fa Tian yawned. He was probably tired. He directly turned into a whip and wrapped around Ning Shu's waist. He began to snore. Ning Shu dealt with the star stones for a long time. Every time the plane was damaged, several planes would collapse in succession. From these situations, it was clear that the situation of the Sea of Law was very bad. The Sea of Law could no longer provide power for these planes. And because of the problem of energy or aging, the planes collapsed just like that. More and more collapsed. If even the old planes couldn't provide power, then there was definitely no power to give birth to new planes. The old planes kept collapsing. Even if these planes had more cells than a human, they couldn't withstand this kind of loss. Ning Shu started to have groundless fears. If the Sea of Law collapsed, these billions of mission enforcers, as well as this huge army, these souls probably wouldn't have a place to stay. If the planes were gone, the organization would be gone. They could only survive in the void. The creatures in the void could probably eat a lot of mission enforcers in one bite. Then there was a way to survive, and that was for everyone to unite. Perhaps there was still a chance of survival. But Ning Shu shook his head. From the results of the battle between the organization and the locust-like little mouse, the mission enforcer army couldn't even deal with the locust-like little mouse. It was very difficult to deal with them, and the little mouse race didn't have any intelligence. Chapter 36-26. In the void, the little mouse was a small reptile. There were even more powerful creatures. The Taishu silver-haired man was the one who wiped out the little mouse's entire race. Therefore, humans were still very weak. Even if they were united, it was not easy to unite such a huge organization. Humans were a race that was prone to infighting. And mission enforcers were all souls. If their souls were destroyed, they would have no follow-up power and no descendants. They were like a small boat in the sea that could be swallowed up at any time. Ning Shu was worried about the country and the people. Was the Taishu really going to die, or was he faking it? It had to be said that the presence of the Grand Elder was like a pillar holding up the sky. However, when the little mouse smelled the rotten smell on his body, the Taishu denied that he was going to die. Ning Shu touched the holy whip at his waist. It was useless to think about this now. It was better to become stronger quickly. As long as he was strong, all the problems would be solved. Any anxiety and worry was because he was weak and had no money. Ning Shu processed the star rocks and placed some star rocks around the god-striking whip. She wondered if the god-striking whip would absorb the star rocks. The holy whip was sleeping and did not care about the star stones. It seemed that the holy whip did not absorb the star stones at all. Although the star stones were tough, they did not have much power. The holy whip did not absorb them. A picky mouth. Another picky mouth. Ning Shu felt a little bitter. He could not cultivate the holy whip. The holy whip was now a 3 or 4-year-old child, which meant that his power could only be transformed into a 3 or 4-year-old child. Then he would grow. To grow, he would need energy. To become strong quickly, he would need a lot of energy. The next generation would be vampires. Therefore, he had to go to the void to find treasures. Even if he could not find the energy body, he had to find other substitutes. He had to find some fruits for Fatan. Raising a child was tough and tiring. When Fatan woke up, Ning Shu was still processing the star stones. Fatan rubbed his eyes and looked at Ning Shu with worry. Ning Shu said, "I'm not tired. I'm fine." The more star stones he dealt with, the more worried Ning Shu became. It was as if the hair on his head was falling off strand by strand, but it didn't grow back. It was as if he was about to become bald. Fatan took out a grape and brought it to Ning Shu's mouth. Ning Shu was a little surprised. Fatan actually placed the grapes in the meson space. This guy was pretty smart. He shared a bunch of grapes with the little mouse and even secretly hid them. Good boy, not bad at all. Ning Shu ate the grapes without hesitation. The grapes were juicy, sweet, and contained a trace of energy. After dealing with the star stones for so long, Ning Shu also felt a little tired. After eating the grapes, he felt refreshed. Even his tiredness had been greatly reduced. These grapes were good stuff. They were delicious and had a lot of energy. He told the little mouse to go earlier. As for whether he would get his head blown off, who cared? After Ning Shu finished eating, Fatan stuffed another grape into Ning Shu's mouth. Ning Shu ate it and shook his head. He said to Fa Tian, keep it for yourself. I won't eat it. Ning Shu taught Fa Tian how to call him by his name. Fa Tian babbled and called Ning Shu. His tone was a little strange. This was a problem with people who had just spoken. Listening to Fa Tian's childish words, Ning Shu's heart was very calm and peaceful. Dealing with the star stones became a lot easier. When the next person came, Ning Shu held Fa Tian's hand and left. Of course, the person who came to take over also gave Fa Tian a small gift. It seemed like there were many people who wanted to form a good relationship with Fa Tian. All of them were hoping that after she died, Fa Tian would choose them to be his master. Back in the system space, the little mouse was lying on the sofa and sleeping soundly. Its nose was foaming. Ning Shu poked the little mouse's stomach, making its snot bubble bigger and burst. The little mouse opened its eyes and looked at Ning Shu unhappily. What are you doing? Ning Shu said, Fa Tian is very clingy to me now. I can't do missions anymore. We can't just wait like this. Let's go look for treasures in the void. Bastard, I haven't even eaten that energy body yet. Now you want to go look for things. You're crazy and shameless. The little mouse glared at Ning Shu and shouted angrily. He was really exploiting it non-stop. The energy it lost had not been replenished yet. It was about to starve to death. How could this guy have the face to say that? He had no face at all. Ning Shu said, we don't have to look for energy bodies. It's good to find something sweet. It was too boring to do nothing and just sit there. The little mouse turned its head. I'm not going. Ning Shu said directly, fine, we'll go by ourselves. The little mouse snorted. Just the two of you going to the void? Are you looking for death? The turbulence in the void could directly roll people into powder. Even if the creatures in the void were touched by the turbulence, they would either die or be injured. With the strength of these two idiots, they would definitely die. The turbulence was random and could move. Ning Shu sighed. I see. Fa Tian likes to eat grapes. I'm going to get some for him. The little mouse rolled its eyes. How can you get something like that? Only I can. Ning Shu immediately said, then I'll have to trouble you. Go and find some grapes for Fa Tian to eat. The little mouse's eyes widened. Damn, you're too shameless. Fine, we won't look for grapes. We'll go for a stroll in the void. It's fine if we find something, but it's fine if we don't. Comparing the two, the little mouse felt that it was more inclined to go for a stroll in the void. No, damn, why did it have to choose between the two? It could totally choose not to go. Ning Shu said, choose one. As she spoke, she took out a book and began to teach Fa Tian how to read. She did not rush the little mouse. The little mouse snorted. It crossed its arms and shook its legs. It was not going. Even if it wanted to go, it would have to wait until it ate the energy body. The emperor did not lack hungry soldiers. Ning Shu pointed at the words in the book and taught Fa Tian. The little mouse beside them heard the sound of the book being read. It buried itself under the pillow, but it could not completely block out the sound. Can you be quieter? Do you have any civility? The little mouse said irritably as it crawled out from under the pillow. Ning Shu held the book. If you think it's noisy, you can go find Li Wen. I have to teach the child now. I won't. You want to send me away so that you can take the energy body for yourself. The little mouse was not fooled. Ning Shu did not think that way. When the little mouse said that, she deliberately said, hey, you reminded me. The little mouse gritted its teeth. Vicious woman, I hit the nail on the head. Ning Shu put down the book and took the fairy tale book to tell Fa Tian a story. The little mouse could not help but say, then let's go for a stroll in the void. Chapter 36-27. Of course, Ning Shu had to satisfy Little Mouse's request. Ning Shu held Heaven's Punisher's hand and flew into the sky. Ning Shu looked in a certain direction and felt a faint soul fluctuation. However, this fluctuation was very weak, probably because it was too far away. Ning Shu's heart skipped a beat. Could it be the detector that was released before? Ning Shu carefully sensed but couldn't sense the specific direction, only the approximate location. Since it was a detector, Li Wen should be able to receive the signal. Let's go to Li Wen's place. Ning Shu said to Little Mouse, let's go to Li Wen first. Little Mouse looked at Ning Shu warily. You really like to take advantage of others. Now you want to take the child to Li Wen. Didn't Li Wen give Fation energy before and it was all absorbed by him? Now you want to go to Li Wen for something. Little Mouse felt that its inference was correct. Otherwise, why would they go to Li Wen? Ning Shu said, hey, I almost forgot. I'm not going to Li Wen for a gift. There's a problem with the detector. Little Mouse was speechless. So annoying. Little Mouse felt like it was being played by her. Ning Shu glanced at Little Mouse. She deserved to be scolded for being so smart. If she knew the specific location, she wouldn't need to go to Li Wen. As for the gift, if someone brought the child to her now, they would also give her something. Things like gifts were passed around in the hands of everyone. In fact, she and others didn't lose anything and didn't gain anything. Along the way, Ning Shu had been talking to Fation. Fation was now jumping out word by word, and his words were not very clear. Ning Shu had to be patient and listen to him word by word. She would be able to understand what he meant. After entering the city through the black hole, Fation was very curious about the machinery in the city. Ning Shu didn't care if he understood or not. He explained that it was made of metal and could walk through energy to complete instructions. They arrived at the top floor of the central building. Li Wen, dressed in a white coat, was waiting for them. Li Wen said, even if you didn't come to me, I would have gone to find you. Li Wen pointed at a huge screen. There was a small green dot flashing on the screen. Ning Shu asked, that's the signal from the detector. Li Wen nodded. It's a green signal. It's probably a mineral deposit. Ning Shu, probably some kind of mineral deposit. Li Wen said, metal, I'll go with you later. Ning Shu wasn't that interested in metals, but he still felt that he should go with Li Wen. Perhaps Fation also needed to absorb metals to strengthen himself. For the sake of Fation's growth, Ning Shu had risked his life. Okay, let's go together. Little Mouse was quite happy. Li Wen took off his white robe and hung it on the hanger, revealing the shirt and casual pants inside. Li Wen was an ancient person, but he was wearing a shirt now. He looked quite handsome. He glanced at Fation. This child. Little Rat immediately told Li Wen about the origin of the child, and told Li Wen to be careful. He said that Ning Shu took the child everywhere to cheat for food and drink, which was extremely shameless. Li Wen just listened and smiled. He took out a Rubik's Cube and handed it to Fation. I made this little thing. Play with it. Ning Shu looked at the Rubik's Cube. It looked familiar. He remembered that he also had a Rubik's Cube. That Rubik's Cube was actually a brain. Could it be that this Rubik's Cube was also a brain? Fation said thank you with difficulty. He didn't call him uncle. Li Wen touched his head and then led Ning Shu and the others to the first floor. He pressed a switch from the wall. A part of the wall opened, and a warship slowly appeared from inside. The surface of the warship was covered with a silver coating. Everyone walked up the steps to the warship. It was filled with high-tech things. Other than Ning Shu and the others, Li Wen also got a lot of machinery to follow them onto the flying ship. There were also some mining tools. Ning Shu saw that everything was in order. When the machinery entered the flying ship, it was arranged neatly. He sighed again. Li Wen seemed to have become an uncrowned king again. The warship started and drove out of the black hole like an arrow. There were no bumps at all as it headed in the direction of the green dot. Sitting comfortably in the warship, they could reach their destination. High-tech was good. It wasn't like when she was holding Little Mouse's hand and stopping. Moreover, there would be a reminder when they encountered turbulence. If the warship was too fast, it would heat up and the brain would take the initiative to reduce its speed. People in the warship didn't need to control it. The brain would do everything. Laziness promoted the development of technology. During the flight, they would occasionally encounter turbulence and bump. Other than that, there were no other accidents. Ning Shu looked at the screen and saw that they were getting closer and closer to the flashing green dot. He didn't know if this place had an owner. If it did, they wouldn't be able to mine it. Ning Shu didn't want to fight with the creatures in the void yet. The green dot got closer and closer and suddenly dimmed. Ning Shu frowned. What was going on? Could it be that someone had broken it? Ning Shu tried to sense her soul power, but she couldn't sense it anymore. She looked at Li Wen. Li Wen said calmly, "Anyway, we're already close. We should be able to find it after scanning. Since it's a mineral deposit, it's not a small place." The huge screen immediately had a fan-shaped scanning shape, spinning in circles. He didn't know if he could scan the mineral deposits under the ground. He didn't know what was so powerful about the metal in the void. Li Wen needed metal for his research. Special metal found underground, the brain said coldly. Then, the flying ship slowly sank into the mountain range. The Black Mountain Range was barren. There was no soil, only crystal-like mountain rocks. They were very hard and filled with a strong baleful aura. This baleful aura was naturally formed, and people would feel very uncomfortable when they got close. Ning Shu felt as if his soul was being pricked by needles. Although it wasn't fatal, it was very uncomfortable. What metal is this? Ning Shu kicked the hard crystal with his foot. The entire canyon was made of such black crystals. Li Wen touched the stones and said, "Fiend condensing stone. It's this kind of thing that can condense the baleful aura of heaven and earth. It's the best material for making weapons. The entire area is made of fiend condensing stone." Li Wen shook his head. "No, the things outside aren't valuable. We should dig them inside." Ning Shu walked around the canyon and found a broken detector. No wonder she couldn't sense her soul power. In this canyon with dense baleful aura, her weak soul power directly washed away her soul power. Li Wen ordered the machines in the flying ship to take the tools to mine the stones. Chapter 36-28. Fa Tian's face turned red in the thick baleful aura. Ning Shu immediately said, "Fa Tian, follow me into the flying ship. Take the phone." Fa Tian was a weapon, but he was still young. Things like baleful aura could affect a person's mind. If a weapon had baleful aura, its power would be greatly increased. However, Ning Shu was afraid that Fa Tian would become a weapon without any intelligence. Especially now that he had transformed. If a weapon could not control its own mind, then it would also implicate the person using the weapon. Some evil weapons had powerful bewitchment and baleful aura, which could enchant a person's mind. Ning Shu carried Fa Tian and walked up the stairs to the flying ship. Fa Tian lay on Ning Shu's shoulder and opened his mouth to absorb a lot of baleful aura. At this moment, his whole body turned red and directly turned into the shape of the god-beating whip. The entire god-beating whip seemed to be burning red and did not move at all. Ning Shu touched it and found that his soul was actually smoking. How should he deal with this? Ning Shu wanted to splash water to cool Fa Tian down, but he was worried that suddenly splashing water would not be good for Fa Tian. Cold, hot, and agitated, it might harm Fa Tian. Ning Shu guarded Fatian and did not care about the situation outside. Ning Shu did not care much about the metal. Ning Shu sighed as she looked at Futian, whose body was completely red. The place where he was lying had been scorched black by his body temperature. Fatian in his whip form could not speak. He did not move and did not seem to feel pain. Outside, there were clanking sounds as they dug out the crystals in the valley. These things were excellent materials for making weapons. How could Li Wen let them go? Ning Shu was wholeheartedly focused on Fatian. When he saw Li Wen and the little mouse rush into the cabin, he asked the artificial intelligence to leave quickly. Ning Shu asked, "What's wrong?" "It's alive, alive," the little mouse said. "What's alive?" Just as Ning Shu asked, the entire flying ship shook. Then, a huge eye appeared outside the window. This eye was very big. Ning Shu was speechless. Fuck, could it be that this canyon was a living thing? Ning Shu released his mental power and saw that the entire flying ship was being pinched between the fingers of a huge creature. It was like a locust being pinched. As for the creature that was holding the flying ship, it treated the flying ship very well. It turned the flying ship over and over again, and it didn't break the flying ship. That was why he was knocking on this creature's body, causing the sleeping creature to worry. Ning Shu, goodbye, live on with a smile. The creature's body was covered in layers upon layers of thick black crystals, making one feel trypophobia just by looking at it. Even though it was in a canyon, no one could tell that it was a creature sleeping here. Furthermore, it was filled with baleful aura. He was definitely ferocious. Ning Shu said to the little mouse, "You're the only one here who's from the Void Land. Go and negotiate with him." The little mouse's fur stood on end. "Why should I talk to that big fool?" Ning Shu said, "You can't beat him." The little mouse jumped up. "Nonsense. I really can't beat him." Li Wen was prepared to abandon the flying ship and let Ning Shu and the little mouse prepare to escape. He wanted to self-destruct the flying ship. Ning Shu said, "Wait, this creature isn't hostile. Wait a little longer." Although it was filled with baleful aura, it looked at the flying ship over and over again. Obviously, it was very good to this thing. They were simply turning the world upside down on the flying ship. Now that the God-striking whip came into contact with the baleful aura, something abnormal happened. Ning Shu flew out of the flying ship. When he saw this creature, he gasped. It was really ugly, covered in black crystals. Only two huge eyes were exposed. Even the mouth couldn't be seen clearly. The two huge eyes looked at Ning Shu. He spat out an unknown voice from his mouth, and Ning Shu couldn't understand what he was saying. Ning Shu and the little mouse asked, "What is he saying?" The little mouse spread its hands speechlessly. "I don't understand. Not every creature in the void is as smart as me." Ning Shu thought that he could communicate with intelligent creatures. He used this skill to try to communicate with this creature. Ning Shu sent out his consciousness to communicate with this big guy. This big guy suddenly approached Ning Shu. He looked at Ning Shu with his huge eyes. His eyelashes were even longer than Ning Shu's height. He spoke in a hurry. Ning Shu understood his words through his consciousness. "Who are you? What is this? Why are you so small? No armor. What kind of creature are you?" Ning Shu apologized to this big guy for what happened earlier. He said that he didn't know that they were alive and disturbed their sleep. Lying down and sleeping so casually. Did the creatures in the void use the sky as their blanket and the earth as their bed? The big guy didn't care. He was quite gentle. When he heard that Ning Shu needed the crystals on his body, he even gave some to Ning Shu. He clenched his hand, and a large number of crystals fell out. "Ning Shu, thank you." Ning Shu pretended to be very happy and kept the crystals. These things were probably the cuticle of this big guy. It was the dust on his body. Did he remove the dirt on his body? Ning Shu was really shocked by this idea. Ning Shu gave these crystals to Li Wen. He should leave the cuticle for Li Wen to use. Li Wen accepted the things. Ning Shu pointed at the big guy's flying ship and asked him to return it to them. The big guy handed the flying ship to Ning Shu. Ning Shu, I can't catch it. The tall man's voice was muffled as he spoke intermittently. Ning Shu understood with his consciousness that the big guy was asking which cub they were from. It was very dangerous for a cub to walk in the void. Ning Shu. They are cubs. Ning Shu said that he ran away from home and came out for a walk. Then, he found a valley. Ning Shu roughly understood that this big guy thought that they were cubs and didn't kill them. He probably had a gentle temperament. Thus, Ning Shu admitted that he was still a baby. Seeing that there seemed to be no danger, the little mouse jumped out and talked to the big guy. The big guy bent down and stared at the little mouse. He talked to the little mouse. Ning Shu. Who was the one who said that he didn't understand? After a while, the little mouse said to Ning Shu, they are from the mountain stone lineage and have a gentle temperament. They are not very dangerous. Yes, they are about the same as some dolphins in the void. Although they are tall and sturdy, they don't attack people. The little mouse patted its chest and heaved a sigh of relief. If they are not dangerous, then what's with the murderous aura all over their bodies? Ning Shu asked. Murderous aura, that should be their body odor, the little mouse said. Ning Shu, so, Fatian was damaged by the big guy's body odor? Why was it so nonsensical? It was clearly murderous aura. Fatian's murderous aura had entered his body. Ning Shu was very worried that Fatian would become a mindless killing machine. That would be too painful. /BK Chapter 36-29 Ning Shu didn't want to stay with this tall guy for too long because he had a strong murderous aura. However, Little Mouse was talking about body odor. What the fuck body odor? The creatures in the void were really interesting. Even their body odor was murderous. The god-beating whip was in a very bad situation now. It had finally transformed and encountered murderous aura. Such a strong murderous aura was enough to destroy his newly born intelligence. Ning Shu said goodbye to Big Tall Guy, but Big Tall Guy let them go very gently. Before leaving, he saw that Ning Shu and Li Wen seemed to like the crystals on them, so he took a large piece of dead skin and gave it to Ning Shu. Ning Shu still had to forcefully accept a large piece of dead skin with a smile, and then gave the dead skin to Li Wen. Since Li Wen liked it, he would give it to Li Wen. The tall guy took a large piece of dead skin for Li Wen and handed it to Li Wen. Li Wen, okay, take it. The creatures in the void always gave people a feeling of laziness. Once they were lazy, they would seem silly. Especially when the other party seemed to be very strong. If they couldn't beat him, they would accept his kindness. The two of them entered the flying ship, which flew far away in an instant. They had to stay away from this guy. Ning Shu saw that the tall guy slowly lay down again, as if he was going to sleep again. It was such a good time, but he was going to sleep again. Life was too long, and there was nothing to do except sleep. Ning Shu was very worried about the red god beating whip. He asked Little Mouse, is it okay now? Little Mouse was a creature in the void, so it should have some understanding of this situation. Little Mouse pondered for a while and said uncertainly, it should be okay. Ning Shu. Should be. Little Mouse said, it's probably like you humans catching a cold. The murderous aura entered your body, and you'll be fine after you get through it. Ning Shu, even a cold could sometimes be fatal. Something like a cold could be described as a genetic modification. The virus carried a fragment of the gene into the human body. The symptoms in the human body were all caused by the rejection of gene fusion. Ning Shu felt bitter in his heart. Although they didn't encounter any danger, Fa Tian, who was out for the first time, fell into a trap. Ning Shu felt that encountering this kind of situation was inevitable. Once Fa Tian developed an immunity against evil aura, yin qi, and the like, he probably wouldn't fall for it so easily in the future. Little Mouse looked at the red holy whip and suggested, "Why don't we let Fa Tian absorb some of those stones?" Ning Shu, nonsense. This was no different from a person who caught a cold and had a fever all over his body being thrown into a world of ice and snow to freeze. It was a complete fool's idea. Right now, Heaven Punisher was sick. Little Mouse was rebuked by Ning Shu and said unhappily, "Then what do you think we should do?" Ning Shu said, "Wait." At this time, they could only see if Fa Tian could endure it. After absorbing the evil aura, Fa Tian would definitely grow, but they didn't know if it was a weapon full of evil aura without intelligence or if he could control the evil aura himself and grow. The flying ship flew into the black hole and returned to the city in the black hole. Fa Tian's body was too hot, so Ning Shu stayed in the flying ship. Li Wen returned to the top floor with a considerable amount of crystals. Little Mouse glanced at Ning Shu and the holy whip and followed Li Wen upstairs. After a while, Little Mouse came down with a plate of fruit and said, "Don't say that I didn't take care of you. Eat." Ning Shu picked up a fruit and took a bite. He didn't taste it and it felt bitter in his mouth. After eating one, he lost the mood. This was how people were when they had weak ribs and soft spots. It was true that when the sun was hit, the mother's heart would hurt. Little Mouse ate the whole plate of fruit and finally sighed and said, "This kind of thing can't fill my stomach." When Little Rat was chatting with Ning Shu, they were all talking about irrelevant things. One moment, he was talking about the melting of the iceberg, and the next moment, he was talking about how the big guy from the mountain rock branch was not smart enough. Ning Shu listened to Little Mouse's chatter and couldn't help but say, "Can you be quiet?" Little Mouse's whiskers stood up. "You really don't know what's good for you. If Li Wen didn't ask me to comfort you, I wouldn't have come." Ning Shu suspected that Li Wen disliked Little Mouse and sent Little Mouse to her side. While the two were talking, the deity beating whip turned into Fa Tian's appearance. Fa Tian closed his eyes and his little face was red. His whole body was tense and he clenched his little fists. His mouth let out a whimper. Ning Shu hugged Fa Tian and comforted him. After transforming, Fa Tian's temperature was lower than the deity beating whip, but it was still hot. If he was a real child, he would probably be a corpse now. Little Mouse didn't talk back to Ning Shu. It stretched out its paw and touched Fa Tian's forehead and said, "Lower the temperature, it'll be fine." Ning Shu nodded. Ning Shu didn't know how long she hugged Fa Tian. His face gradually returned to normal and his body temperature also went down. Ning Shu was even more nervous now and stared at Fa Tian. She didn't know if Fa Tian was still rational. She stared at Fa Tian's eyes. His long eyelashes trembled and he opened his eyes. The color was clear, as if there were thousands of stars in them. They were very beautiful. Ning Shu let out a sigh of relief. Looking at this pair of eyes, it didn't look like the eyes of an irrational person. In other words, Fa Tian's vaccine was successful. Ning Shu smiled and said, "You're awake." Fa Tian sat up from Ning Shu's arms. Ning Shu smiled softly. Ning Shu held him in her arms with her back facing Fa Tian. Ning Shu's face was full of malevolence and she took a deep breath. Little Mouse was frightened by Ning Shu's face. "Damn, this woman is crazy. She's so scary." When she faced Fa Tian again, Ning Shu's expression had returned to normal. She didn't know how much Fa Tian had grown, but his body didn't seem to have changed much. Holding Fa Tian's hand, Ning Shu came to say goodbye to Li Wen. Li Wen looked at Fa Tian and said, "It seems that you've recovered." Fa Tian saw the crystals on the ground and picked one up. The crystal in his hand shrank at a speed visible to the naked eye and finally disappeared. Ning Shu was shocked. Fa Tian didn't seem to have any adverse reactions. However, Ning Shu still didn't dare to let Fa Tian absorb too much. He couldn't absorb as much as he wanted just because he had antibodies. Li Wen said, "Since he likes it, let him absorb it. Take some away later." Ning Shu nodded. The evil spirit could sharpen a weapon, like a whetstone. But if it was sharpened too hard, the knife would be worn out. He couldn't let Fa Tian absorb it so recklessly. It exceeded his tolerance and would affect his mind. Ning Shu didn't take many crystals. He said goodbye to Li Wen and prepared to leave. Seeing Little Mouse standing still, he said, "Why are you still standing there? Let's go." Chapter 36:30. Li Wen said to Little Mouse, "Follow her. I'm busy and don't have time to accompany you. It's lonely and lifeless here." Little Mouse said unhappily, "You're chasing me away again because it's too lonely here. That's why I want to accompany you." Li Wen shook her head and stopped talking. Little Mouse could only follow Ning Shu. After leaving the central building, Ning Shu said to Little Mouse, "Li Wen is researching technology and needs to be fully focused. Stay by her side and influence her." Little Mouse sighed and looked rather worried. "I feel that Li Wen dislikes me." Ning Shu comforted it, "You're thinking too much." Little Mouse immediately said, "I think so too." Ning Shu was speechless. "As long as you're happy." Little Mouse asked Fa Tian, "Do you like to eat grapes? I'll bring you to pick grapes." Fa Tian nodded. Thus, the group sneaked to a place like thieves. This place was very big. It was an orchard with all kinds of fruits emitting a luster that made people drool. This kind of garden didn't grow naturally at first glance. The lazy void creature actually opened an orchard. This was a bit strange. Seeing that Little Mouse was familiar with the place, it probably came here often to pick things. Whoosh! A big bird flew across the sky and stopped on a towering ancient tree. It pecked at the fruits with its beak and ate them comfortably. This bird had gorgeous feathers and was very beautiful. Ning Shu was familiar with this kind of bird because it cursed the moment it opened its mouth. Little Mouse didn't say anything and waited for the bird to leave before picking the fruits. After the bird was full, it actually rested on the tree and started to nap. Ning Shu said in a low voice, "Let's go. Taking without asking is stealing. Let's go." Little Mouse looked at Ning Shu with disdain. "Didn't you eat it with relish before? Now you're complaining that it's stolen." "I'm not stealing, I'm borrowing," Little Mouse said shamelessly. "I'll pay you back when I have the money." Ning Shu was speechless. "Forget it. Let's exchange something with the bird. If I find out that you stole it, I won't just smash your head, I'll scold you until you vomit blood." The beak of this kind of bird was extremely dirty. It was inconceivable that a bird that ate fruits and drank dew could have such a dirty beak. "You poor bastard, how could these void creatures be interested in your things? $%, who's talking?" The bird was awakened by the rustling sound and began to curse as soon as it opened its mouth. Ning Shu dragged Little Mouse and brought Fa Tian away. He said to Fa Tian, "We can take things that don't have an owner, but things that have an owner belong to someone else. We won't take other people's things, but other people can't take our things without our permission, understand?" Fa Tian didn't understand, but he still nodded. Little Mouse rolled its eyes. "Hypocrite, hypocrite." Ning Shu didn't care about Little Mouse's sarcasm. A little fruit wouldn't kill him if he didn't eat it. Back in the system space, Ning Shu went to Fire City to take a look at the ice bricks. The ice layer on the surface was thinner, but it would take a long time before it melted. Little Mouse saw that Ning Shu was back and quickly asked, "Is it melted?" Ning Shu shook his head, and Little Mouse immediately lay down on the sofa, lifeless. Ning Shu patted Fa Tian's head and said, "Child, I have something to do and have to leave, so be good and wait at home for me to come back." Fa Tian grabbed Ning Shu's skirt and shook his head unhappily. Ning Shu said, "Be good, you can play with Hausi, and there's an uncle who can talk to you." Ning Shu's mouth was dry from talking, but he finally got Fa Tian to nod. Ning Shu said to Dan Qing, "Do the mission. I'll be back soon." Ning Shu didn't hesitate at all and let Dan Qing teleport him away. She didn't want to waste time and Fa Tian would drag her away again. Fa Tian saw that Ning Shu had disappeared and sat on Little Mouse's body unhappily. Little Rat screamed and squeezed out of the crowd. "Both of you are not good people." They both bullied him. Ungrateful, they didn't even remember the food that he ate. Ning Shu merged into a body and opened his eyes. His eyes hurt a little, and he felt that they were covered up. In a daze, he saw a modern home. It was a modern plane. Ning Shu sat up with a splitting headache, and his breath smelled of alcohol. It seemed that he was drunk and had a headache. Ning Shu rubbed her head and felt a stubble of short hair. He touched his lower body, and it was indeed so. Ning Shu was already very calm. So what if it was a man's body? Ning Shu got up, poured a glass of water, and gulped it down. Ning Shu began to receive information from this plane. The sender was called Fei Wen. As for the reason for drinking, his fiancée was about to reconcile with her first love and abandon him, her fiancé. Anyway, it was a grudge between the three of them. After figuring out the ins and outs of the matter, Ning Shu took some hangover medicine and lay on the bed to sleep comfortably. As for the mission, he had to be clear-headed. While he was in a daze, someone came into the bedroom and covered him with a blanket. Ning Shu opened his eyes and met a pair of conflicted and guilty eyes. Jian Luo smiled at Ning Shu and said, "Why did you drink so much? Your head should be hurting, I made porridge for you." Ning Shu sat up and asked, "When did you come?" "A while ago. I saw that you were asleep, so I didn't disturb you." Jian Luo's gentleness was tinged with pain. She was very melancholic and seemed to have a lot on her mind. Jian Luo was also a girl with a hard life. When she was young, because her father was a cruel murderer, the people around her ostracized her and avoided her. The murderer's daughter was also a murderer. Because she was ostracized and ridiculed by the people around her, she became more and more melancholic. The more melancholic she was, the more people felt that she would also become a murderer in the future. She was a bad person to the bone, not a good person at first glance. Her only ray of hope was when she was 15 or 16 years old, when she met a boy. This boy didn't care about other people's gazes, nor her melancholic personality, and became her friend. When the boy and girl walked together, different feelings naturally grew in their hearts, becoming the most precious and pure feelings in each other's hearts. And this boy was the young master of a rich family. This kind of person could become pneumonia in the eyes of some people. The young master was kidnapped, and in order to save him, Jian Luo was also kidnapped by the criminals. What would happen if a girl as delicate as a flower fell into the hands of the criminals? The result was that she was raped, and in front of the young master. On the other hand, the young master was stunned as he watched his girlfriend being treated like this by the evildoers. Even if the rope was loosened, he didn't dare to rush up to save his girlfriend. After the two were rescued, the young master's family was dealt with by the elders, causing the two to be separated. Chapter 36-31. A young boy and girl lost contact with each other due to the intervention of their elders. The client met Jian Luo abroad, and because they were from the same country, they got closer and closer to each other. As for the client, his identity was a bit melodramatic. He was the uncle of the young master, but he was an illegitimate child. Naturally, he did not lack money, and at the same time, he started his own business. After meeting Jian Luo, he took charge of her life and used his own resources to train her into a designer. After so many years of feelings, they naturally came together and became engaged. Because of the company's problems, the two decided to return to China. After returning to China, Jian Luo met the boy who was her only hope when she was young. Even with Fei Wen's company for so many years, she survived the painful days of being raped. Perhaps it was because she forgot the pain after the scar healed, or perhaps it was because first love was always unforgettable. Jian Luo still had feelings for her first love. However, she was now Fei Wen's fiancée, so she did not reunite with her first love. That boy back then, even if he did not recognize his first love, he still slowly developed feelings for her. Although she had grown up, the shadow and temperament on her body were indelible. In her, the man saw the shadow of his first love, as well as the torment of his heart. What happened back then was a pain in the man's heart that he could not get rid of. All these years, he had been searching for his first love. Because of this, he was estranged from his family. Jian Luo had all the characteristics of a sadomasochistic female protagonist. Patience, kindness. She did not seem to want to hurt anyone, but she hurt everyone. She was in pain, and others were in pain. Her entire body exuded an energy field that was the most bitter in the world. Coupled with what she had experienced, all the bitter things in the world had happened to her. She was extremely depressed. Ning Shu rolled her eyes. If she was the client, she wouldn't have stayed with such a bitter and vengeful person. They were sensitive and fragile, but it was as if they couldn't die. Nothing could make them die. Life was short. Why did she have to be with such a person who exuded negative energy and was in a bad mood? In just a few decades, what was the point of not being with interesting and happy people? The end result of the client was to stay in the sanatorium all alone. Their first love, who was riddled with scars and had so many sad stories, could actually be together again. Are you happy together? The male lead had been in pain all these years. Firstly, it was because of regret. He hated himself for not being able to save the girl he liked. Secondly, it was because of his family. The girl had clearly come to save him, but she was treated like this by his family. Whether it was in terms of family background or family, the two of them were not suitable for each other. Especially when Jian Luo's father was a vicious murderer. The client was an illegitimate son, so he did not have the right to anger a wealthy family. However, using the resources given by his father, he could be considered to have developed. He could be considered a promising young man, but he himself wasn't all that glorious. But people couldn't choose where they came from. Fei Wen and Jian Luo were a perfect match in terms of status and ideology. The male side did not have any elders to interfere. As for Jian Luo's past, Fei Wen was also very clear about it and tolerated her. Logically speaking, the two of them should be together to warm each other up and heal each other. The past was not important. What was important was the future. However, Jian Luo's heart could not let go of her first love. Ning Shu got up from the bed and took a shower. His head felt better. Jian Luo scooped a bowl of porridge for Ning Shu and stirred it with a spoon. Seeing Ning Shu come out, she said, "Eat something, your body will feel better." Ning Shu sat down and drank the porridge slowly. The porridge was sticky and had a sweet taste. Ning Shu frowned and drank it slowly. Jian Luo saw Ning Shu frown and asked, "Does it not taste good?" "Not bad, just so-so, barely passable." Ning Shu said 3 words in a row that were not praises. Jian Luo was stunned. Fei Wen was a bit strange. Logically speaking, he was a gentle person. Even if the porridge was not good, he would not say that. Jian Luo said, "It's not that good. It's not that good." Ning Shu said, "Indeed." Jian Luo thought that Ning Shu was drunk and was in a bad mood. She asked, "Did something happen at work that made you drink so much?" Ning Shu said, "Of course not, there's something else." Jian Luo nodded and did not say anything else. Seeing that Ning Shu had finished eating, she scooped another bowl for Ning Shu. Jian Luo's expression was melancholy. She looked like she had a lot on her mind. It made people feel sad when they saw her. Ning Shu said, "Am I going to die? Why are you always frowning like this? What the hell?" A person's energy field was a magical thing. After staying with such a person for a long time, one would feel depressed. Jian Luo could not help but laugh. "What are you talking about? Don't talk about dying." Even if she was smiling, it was not a carefree and bright smile. Ning Shu felt that this kind of insincere smile hurt her eyes. He really did not know what the client liked about her. Maybe it was because they were in the same boat. Jian Luo wanted to say something but stopped. Ning Shu looked at her and asked, "Do you have something to tell me?" Jian Luo hesitated and shook her head. Ning Shu chuckled. "Can you be honest about your relationship with your first love?" That man was actually his nephew. When he thought of that family and the relationship between his fiancée and his nephew, he felt terrible. The client was drowning his sorrows in alcohol because he knew. Jian Luo, on the other hand, had good intentions. She did not want to hurt the client. She did not acknowledge her first love and did not tell her fiancé. What a kind-hearted person. In order not to hurt others, she endured it silently. Ning Shu, damn it. He hated wasting other people's time and lives the most. You've already fallen in love with someone else and you still don't say it. Do you think I'm a fool? You can't control your feelings for your first love and can't bear to hurt your fiancé. Haha, you're the most miserable person in the world. Jian Luo was probably still a little guilty and felt that she had no conscience. These years, she did not have to worry about food and clothing because of Fei Wen. Because of Fei Wen, she became a designer. She could be considered a successful person. She was no longer the gloomy and helpless little girl who had to bear the malice of people around her because of her murderer father. Fei Wen had done so much for her. For so many years, her first love did not do anything for her except regret. With material assurance, there would be spiritual pursuit. If Jian Luo did not have to worry about food and clothing these years, the first thing she thought about was survival, not love. Being good to her became a matter of course. Now Ning Shu wanted to take back everything. If it was not because of love, but because you're my fiancé, there would be these benefits. Chapter 36-32. There was no such thing as inexplicable love and hatred in the world. There was no such thing as inexplicable sacrifice. Even if it was material sacrifice, it was also for the enjoyment of the spiritual joy brought by love. Even love was a process of both parties giving and then getting something from each other. Mutual exchange, mutual gain. Ning Shu said coldly, "You really don't have anything to say to me?" A trace of pain flashed across Jian Luo's face. She shook her head. "No." "Oh," Ning Shu replied. "Since we're already engaged, let's get married soon." A look of resistance flashed across Jian Luo's face. Perhaps even she herself did not notice the leakage of her emotions. "We have just returned to the country. Let's get married when we settle down a little." Jian Luo let out a long sigh. Perhaps it was really time to say goodbye to the past. She saw him. He had not been living well these years. She wanted to tell him to let it go. She did not blame him. Ning Shu snorted. Why did she regard this kind of indecisiveness as an advantage? She treated him as a safe haven here. Everyone had a soft heart. They would all get hurt. How could they withstand such repeated kneading and torture? Ning Shu had no feelings for Jian Luo. Seeing Jian Luo's worried face, he only felt annoyed. What a shame. Under Ning Shu's gaze, Jian Luo felt that her internal organs and the things hidden in her heart were exposed under the sun. She felt embarrassed. Especially when she met his bright eyes, Jian Luo wanted to run away. She felt guilty and uneasy. Jian Luo touched her bag and held it tightly, as if she wanted to draw strength from it. She pretended that nothing had happened. She said a few words of concern and then ran away. Ning Shu finished all the porridge in the bowl. He asked her to confess. Materially, Jian Luo still could not leave him for the time being. He changed his clothes and went to the company. The first thing Ning Shu did when he arrived was to remove Jian Luo's design. Generally speaking, the client would use her design first. In fact, there were other designers in the company. Jian Luo learned that the design was removed. She immediately came to Ning Shu and asked, "What's wrong with the design?" "There's nothing wrong with it. It's just that it doesn't fit the theme this time." Jian Luo frowned. It was clearly designed for the theme this time, but Fei Wen had found the worst excuse. Jian Luo. Ning Shu asked, "Are you angry?" "No, I used to use your designs. Now, I have to give other designers in the company a chance. Otherwise, these designers will take my money and do nothing," Ning Shu said directly. "You're not the only designer in the company. Besides, you're an ambitious person. You can't always stay in a small company like mine." Jian Luo looked seriously at Ning Shu's face and finally said, "What's not good about it? I can change it." "Then take it back and change it. Maybe it can be used after some changes." Even if he tried to change it, he wouldn't pass it. Jian Luo took the folder and left. When she reached the door, she looked back at Ning Shu, pursed her lips, went out, and closed the office door. At noon, Ning Shu went to find Jian Luo for lunch. He found that Jian Luo's seat was empty. It seemed that she had already left. Ning Shu went out of the company and was going to find a restaurant for lunch. If there was no accident, Jian Luo should have been invited by her first love. It was probably because the green hat on his head kept flashing that he bumped into two people. In the coffee shop next to the company, the two were sitting by the window. At a glance, it was quite obvious. If there was a downpour at this time, she would look even more miserable. Right next to the company, and sitting by the window. Sigh, could they hide a little? Now, everyone in the company knew that Jian Luo was Fei Wen's fiancé. Were they not afraid of being seen by the company's people? Gossip was a fearful thing. Maybe they were open and had nothing to hide. Ning Shu pushed the door into the coffee shop and walked in front of the two. He bent down and put his hand on Jian Luo's shoulder, and said softly, "Are you meeting a friend?" Jiang Yingyao frowned and looked at Ning Shu's hand on Jian Luo's shoulder. He looked unhappy and asked, "Who are you?" Oh, obviously Jian Luo hadn't told Jiang Yingyao that she had a fiancé. Ning Shu said, "I am her fiancé." Jiang Yingyao's face was shocked and sad. Obviously, Jiang Yingyao had feelings for Jian Luo. Jiang Yingyao's face was very pale. He stood up awkwardly and said in a trembling voice, "I'll go first." Jian Luo bit her lips and watched Jiang Yingyao leave in a daze. She forced a smile and said to Ning Shu, former classmate, "So ugly." It was a fake smile again. It was so bitter that water could be wrung out of it. She was speechless. She probably had such a bitter look in front of the client and her. She smiled sweetly in front of Jiang Yingyao. Ning Shu pushed Jiang Yingyao's coffee aside and said to Jian Luo, "You know Jiang Yingyao? You know him too. I'm his uncle." His grandfather was the client's father. Jian Luo obviously didn't expect that her first love had such a relationship with her fiancé. This relationship made Jian Luo even more painful. "I won't go to the Jiang family. The Jiang family won't accept me. You don't have to worry." Jian Luo showed a crying smile again. Ning Shu couldn't bear to look at her. Jian Luo began to speak again. She looked like she was constipated. Ning Shu said, "You seem to have something on your mind. What do you want to tell me?" Jian Luo shook her head again and didn't say anything. Ning Shu was furious. He wanted to strangle Jian Luo's neck. Damn it. She wasn't afraid of hurting anyone at all. She just chose to be afraid. She swayed left and right, wanting love and a sense of security. "In that case, I'll stimulate you." Ning Shu said, "I've thought about it. I want to get married in a month. Choosing between the two, no matter who you choose, you have to give up the other." It was enough to make you feel distressed. Especially when this person originally belonged to you. Even if you didn't love him that much, after so many years of relationship, you would have feelings even if you raised a pet. Especially when this man gave her a lot of things. After so many years of care and love, Jian Luo was already used to it. To give up familiar things and form a habit in 28 days, some of Jian Luo's habits must have been deeply ingrained in her bones. Jian Luo looked at Ning Shu in surprise. "Why so fast? There are many things that I can't prepare in time." Ning Shu said, "1 month is enough. It will be ready soon. Get ready to be the bride." Ning Shu smiled. "Have you eaten? Let's eat." Jian Luo was not in the mood to eat at all. But she was dragged to eat by Ning Shu. The food on the table was tasteless. Her bitter face looked like she had been constipated for more than 10 years. Chapter 36-33. Looking at Jian Luo's constipated face, Ning Shu felt that he couldn't eat anymore. Could she live a good life? Why was she so miserable every day? To put it bluntly, being happy was a day, being unhappy was another day. Why couldn't she be happy? Why did she have to make herself suffer? Did she hate herself, or did she hate the people around her? Why did she have to emit negative energy all the time to affect other people's mood? Ning Shu put down his chopsticks and asked, "It's not good." Jian Luo shook her head. Ning Shu asked, "You don't have money?" Jian Luo still shook her head. Now Jian Luo didn't have to worry about food and clothing, and she had a stable job. Her monthly salary was actually quite high, not to mention that she had a client. Ning Shu asked, "Are you not feeling well?" Jian Luo hesitated for a moment and shook her head. Ning Shu asked, "Then why do you look unhappy?" Jian Luo apologized, "I'm sorry. There's nothing to be sorry about. It seems that you're in a bad mood. You're about to get married. Just be happy." At the mention of marriage, Jian Luo's face became even more depressed. Ning Shu paid the bill and said to Jian Luo, "I see that you're not in a good state recently. You can't even look at the things you design. Can you tell me what happened?" Could she be honest? Jian Luo said, "Maybe it's because I'm back in China. A lot of things have come back to my mind." Ning Shu said directly, "If you don't want to stay in China, then let's go back and live abroad." Jian Luo shook her head. Ning Shu was furious. She couldn't do this and couldn't do that. She didn't know what Jian Luo was thinking. Ning Shu immediately put on a constipated face and looked at Jian Luo. He was emitting negative energy all over his body, as if he was very unhappy, very unhappy. The client rarely got angry with Jian Luo. Maybe he knew that Jian Luo had a sad past in her heart and didn't want to add to Jian Luo's pain. It was easy to accept and forget when people were good to others. But one bad thing was enough to leave a deep impression and not be forgotten for a long time. She was also a person with a temper. When Ning Shu lost his temper, Jian Luo calmed down and said, "You are still angry. Okay, don't be angry." Ning Shu snorted, stood up, and walked out of the room. Jian Luo hurriedly caught up with Ning Shu. She looked up at Ning Shu's expression and couldn't help but laugh. She reached out and held Ning Shu's hand. Her fingers intertwined with Ning Shu's. Jian Luo's hand was a bit cold. Even though it was summer, when she suddenly put her hand in Ning Shu's, Ning Shu felt a chill in his palm, as if he was holding an ice cube. Heh, you want to keep warm? Dream on. Ning Shu let go of Jian Luo's hand. He was only bribing her with such ambiguous intimacy. He was using this kind of behavior to stop her from getting to the bottom of the matter. In the end, he was just feeling guilty. Jian Luo frowned and held Ning Shu's hand again. Ning Shu shook it off again. Jian Luo stubbornly held Ning Shu's hand and suddenly laughed. You look really cute when you are angry. All these years, I have seen you sulking and not saying anything. I am very happy to see you like this. Ning Shu, heh, what kind of behavior is this? You don't cherish you and think it is cool to be angry at you. Okay, there will be many days where I will be angry at you and act cool in the future. Ning Shu and Jian Luo walked to the door of the restaurant, but were told that they couldn't go out. The outside had been blocked by the police. As for the reason, it was that the gangsters had entered the restaurant. Now it was blocked to prevent the gangsters from going out. Ning Shu, gangsters. Then the people in the restaurant were in danger. There were so many hostages, but the restaurant staff did not directly say that there were bad guys in the restaurant. Instead, they said that the restaurant was doing activities. Now there were free desserts and participation in the lottery. In short, it would not cause panic. With such a big spending, Jiang Yingyao would probably be the one to pay the bill in the end. Ning Shu saw Jiang Yingyao talking to his subordinates outside through the glass of the restaurant. Jiang Yingyao was an elite police officer. His family was so rich, but he became a police officer because of his first love. He was kidnapped when he was young and implicated his first love. His heart was in pain, and he relied on catching all kinds of gangsters to vent the regret and pain in his heart. There was also the guilt for his first love. Ning Shu curled his lips. The gangsters just had to run to this restaurant and let these two have a chance to meet. Ning Shu was very unhappy. Jiang Yingyao took his subordinates to look for the gangsters in the restaurant. When he saw Ning Shu and Jian Luo, his face was a little ugly, but he still said to Jian Luo with concern, "Be careful." Jian Luo just nodded. It seemed that she was not familiar with Jiang Yingyao at all. Jiang Yingyao had no time to be disappointed now. It was more important to catch the gangsters, especially when Jian Luo was still here. The tragedy of more than 10 years ago could not happen again. Ning Shu sat on the chair and saw the dessert that the waiter brought. He glanced at the waiter and asked, "What dessert is this?" The waiter glanced at the crystal-clear dessert and stammered, "I'm new here. I'm not familiar with the things in the restaurant." Ning Shu nodded and looked at the waiter's fingers again. "Your nails are so dirty. You're really a waiter." The waiter's fingers were rough, and there was some black mud under his nails. Most importantly, he was not good-looking. As a waiter in a high-end restaurant, he should at least look clean. He was particularly pleasing to the eye when he wore a uniform. When the waiter heard Ning Shu's words, he immediately showed a dangerous expression and used his arm to strangle Jian Luo, who was closest to him. A sharp knife was pressed against Jian Luo's neck. If it moved forward a little, it would pierce the skin on her neck. The waiter was sweating and shouted in a bluff, "Don't come over, or I'll kill her." Ning Shu pretended to be panicked. "Let go of her." Jiang Yingyao rushed over and immediately appeased the bad guy and agreed to the bad guy's demands. Jiang Yingyao was not an ordinary policeman. Even if the bad guy asked for 5 million, Jiang Yingyao could do it. The bad guy was emotional and did not believe Jiang Yingyao's promises. His face was red with excitement. Unknowingly, the blade cut Jian Luo's neck. "Let go of her first. Let go of her." Jiang Yingyao's eyes were bloodshot. Even his body bent a lot and looked a lot weaker. He was probably thinking of more than 10 years ago, especially when there was the shadow of his first love on this woman. The tragic scene repeated itself. Jiang Yingyao covered his head and had a splitting headache. "Boss, how are you?" The subordinate saw Jiang Yingyao's painful look and thought he was not feeling well. Jiang Yingyao gritted his teeth and said, "Find a way to rescue the hostage." Jiang Yingyao calmed down. While talking to the bad guy to distract him, he let the surrounding police slowly approach. The commotion here made the customers in the restaurant disperse. The bad guy had shown up, so it was better to let the customers go. Chapter 36-34. Jiang Yingyao was nervous and fearful, so was Jian Luo. Smelling the man's sweat and his breath when he spoke, Jian Luo could not help but think of the things she tried to forget. Those men were on top of her, and her ears were filled with rampant and disgusting laughter. That was a nightmarish memory. Her back was pressed tightly against a man's body, causing Jian Luo to tremble uncontrollably, and her face was extremely pale. He was so frightened that he stood there in a daze, like a dead duck that was about to be strangled by someone. Jian Luo's gaze fell on Jiang Yingyao. At that time, such an unbearable thing happened in front of Jiang Yingyao. It really made people want to die. This criminal did not know what crime he had committed, and was especially afraid of being caught by the police. Ning Shu was tempting the criminal, saying that he would give the criminal money or hire a lawyer. If he was really wronged, if he really killed someone, then the crime would be confirmed. As Jian Luo's fiancé, he definitely couldn't just stand by the side and do nothing or say anything. The criminal looked at Ning Shu and was stunned for a moment. Just as he was about to ask something, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his head. Ning Shu rushed over and grabbed the criminal's wrist. With a twist of his hand, he kicked the criminal's stomach. The criminal could not control his body and fell to the ground. Jian Luo would definitely be saved, so he might as well do it himself. When he confessed, Jian Luo would be in more pain. Did she hate him because of love? No, she did not even love him, so how could she hate him? Jian Luo sat softly on the ground. Jiang Yingyao rushed over and asked about Jian Luo's situation with concern. He took out a handkerchief and wiped the blood on Jian Luo's neck. Jian Luo's tears flowed down, and she threw herself into Jiang Yingyao's arms and cried. Jiang Yingyao patted Jian Luo's back gently and comforted her. "It's okay, it's okay." Jian Luo cried for a while before she realized something. She quickly pushed out of Jiang Yingyao's arms and said gratefully, "Thank you, police uncle." Jian Luo tried to use this to cover up the situation just now. Ning Shu reached out and helped Jian Luo up from the ground and asked, "Are you okay?" Jian Luo said, "I'm fine." Jiang Yingyao called the emergency number and said to Ning Shu and Jian Luo, "His neck is injured. Go to the hospital and have a look. I'll see you when I'm done." Ning Shu immediately refused. "No need. You guys go ahead. Don't delay." Walking to the door, Jian Luo looked back and saw Jiang Yingyao looking at her, his eyes filled with sorrow. Jian Luo's heart ached. She hurriedly turned around and followed Ning Shu into the ambulance. When they arrived at the hospital, the doctor disinfected Jian Luo's wound. It was not a big deal. Jian Luo touched the gauze on her neck. Thinking of Ning Shu rushing up to save her, she could not help but say, "But it was so dangerous. Why did you rush up?" Ning Shu just said, "We have to give it a try, but the gangster is so agitated that he might hurt you." Jian Luo was a little touched, but that was all. Being moved was passive, but being moved was active. Loving is different from being loved. Ning Shu said to Jian Luo, "Since you're injured, don't work for the time being. You're also frightened." Ning Shu hesitated and asked, "Do you want to ask Dr. Steve to come and see you?" Steve was Jian Luo's psychiatrist. He had been counseling Jian Luo all these years. Jian Luo was now like a normal person, but she could not leave the counseling. Jian Luo had encountered such a thing in the past. When the client met Jian Luo was cold, like a living dead, and closed her heart. Although Jian Luo was often autistic and looked constipated, she was much better than before. It could be seen that the client had spent a lot of effort on Jian Luo over the years. He had accompanied Jian Luo through the most painful moment of her life. Jian Luo's face was very pale. She shook her head. "No, I'm fine." Since she said no, Ning Shu would not ask Dr. Steve to come. The salary of this kind of psychiatrist was expensive. He had spent a lot of money on Jian Luo. In addition to counseling, he had also trained Jian Luo. He had used money and connections to train Jian Luo into a designer. Jian Luo was finally like a normal person. She had emotions like a normal person. In the end, Jiang Yingyao did nothing and went to pick the peaches. "Oh, shit." Ning Shu looked at Jian Luo and said, "I see that you're very close to Jiang Yingyao. Are you just friends?" Jian Luo bit her lips and said, "I have a story with her." Jian Luo was not called Jian Luo in the past. Jian Luo was a name later. So Jiang Yingyao felt that Jian Luo was very similar to his first love, but the name was different. Jian Luo had not met Jiang Yingyao yet. She did not want to hurt Fei Wen. Secondly, she did not know what entanglements would happen after they met. Jian Luo was forced to reopen her scars and tell him everything that had happened. In the past, when the client knew that Jian Luo had been raped, he did not ask the details to avoid causing Jian Luo's inner pain. Especially at that time, Jian Luo was simply a walking corpse. Ning Shu said, "So Jiang Yingyao is your first love?" Jian Luo carefully looked at Ning Shu. "I did not meet him. He does not know me." Ning Shu shook his head. "I don't think so. He seems to have fallen in love with you again. How do you want to deal with this?" Jian Luo denied Ning Shu's words. "It's not like that. He just feels guilty and treats me as the original me." Ning Shu stared at Jian Luo. "You have feelings for him too?" Jian Luo awkwardly avoided Ning Shu's eyes. Then her eyes became firm. "I just want to live a peaceful life with you. You are my choice." Ning Shu smiled. "Okay, let's bring forward the wedding half a month. The sudden appearance of a love rival makes me feel very urgent. I have to marry you quickly." Jian Luo touched her neck and looked at Ning Shu reproachfully. "How can I get married like this? I can't get married with a scar on my neck. It will be fine in half a month. And there is concealer. It's not a big deal." Jian Luo's expression looked more relaxed. "It's a lot easier to say it out loud. I feel very uneasy hiding it from you." Ning Shu just smiled. She had no qualms about dealing with the person who entrusted her with the task. Perhaps the client was too tolerant. Ning Shu and the two arrived at the entrance of the hospital. Fortunately, they met Jiang Yingyao. Jiang Yingyao asked Jian Luo, "Is the wound serious?" Jian Luo first looked at Ning Shu and then said to Jiang Yingyao, "It's okay. It's just a scratch." Chapter 36-35. Jiang Yingyao looked at Jian Luo as if he wanted to say something. Ning Shu almost rolled his eyes. In a way, Jiang Yingyao and Jian Luo were quite similar. They looked constipated and couldn't say anything even if they wanted to. Probably people who hid and suppressed their feelings were all like this. It was very painful to hide one's inner feelings and make a choice against one's heart. Jiang Yingyao still opened his mouth and said to Jian Luo, "Can I talk to you?" Jian Luo looked at Ning Shu. She had just told her fiancé about her relationship with Jiang Yingyao, and now Jiang Yingyao wanted to talk to him alone. What should she do? Seeing the pleading look in Jiang Yingyao's eyes, Jian Luo didn't know what to do. Ning Shu said generously, "Go ahead. Jian Luo nodded and followed Jiang Yingyao to the side. She didn't deliberately avoid Ning Shu, but Ning Shu couldn't hear what they were talking about. Jian Luo asked, "What do you want to tell me?" Jiang Yingyao looked at Jian Luo's face carefully. "I'm sorry to have implicated you this time. You know, you really look like someone, very much. I've always thought of you as her." Jiang Yingyao said sadly, "I don't know if you'd like to hear a story." Jian Luo knew what Jiang Yingyao was going to say, but she didn't want to hear it. She said, "This is between you and her. You don't have to tell me. I don't think she will hate you." Jiang Yingyao shook his head. "You don't understand. You don't understand at all. I can't forget her, but when I see you, I'm sorry for her. I swore to squeeze her in my heart for the rest of my life. But I don't know when, her face when she was young gradually blurred in my mind and was replaced by your face. I keep telling myself that you are not her, you are not her." But he couldn't control himself. Jiang Yingyao glanced at the man over there. He was a handsome and tall man, and his identity was not simple. She would definitely be happy if she was with him. And he was a person with scars in his heart. He was not qualified. He was sorry to the person in his memory, and also sorry to the person in front of him. Jiang Yingyao apologized. "I'm sorry to have caused you trouble. Such things still happened. In the end, it still happened." Jian Luo couldn't tell what she was feeling. It was 70% pain and 30% indescribable joy. It was a joy that suddenly rose from her heart. Jian Luo understood that Jiang Yingyao had fallen in love with her. This joy was probably because Jiang Yingyao had fallen in love with her without knowing her identity. She probably really liked him. He didn't know her identity, which was very contradictory. He liked her because there was a shadow of the past on her. But because of this shadow, Jiang Yingyao fell in love with her. This feeling was really strange and subtle. Jian Luo sighed and said, "She must want you to live well and not indulge in the past. I look like the one in your heart. You will think of her when you see me. It will bring back your painful memories. Let's not meet again." Jiang Yingyao shook his head. "It's not a painful memory. She's the best in my heart." Jian Luo chuckled. "You're saying that she's beautiful in front of me. What should I think if I hear that?" Jian Luo wanted to ask, "Do you like her, or me?" But this kind of words shouldn't be said. With their relationship, she couldn't say such things. Jian Luo said, "I'm going to get married. He's a very good person. I hope you can find your own happiness." Jiang Yingyao was stunned. His throat was slowly filled with bitterness. It was so bitter that his tongue was numb. After a while, he said with trembling lips, Then I wish you happiness." Jian Luo's heart suddenly hurt. She forced a smile and said, "Thank you. When the time comes, come to the wedding." Jian Luo couldn't say such words. Both of them were suppressing the pain in their hearts. They looked at each other with eyes full of affection. But because of reality, Jian Luo's eyes turned red. She was afraid that Jiang Yingyao would see it, so she turned and left. She returned to Ning Shu's side. Ning Shu deliberately asked, "What happened to your eyes?" He asked while knowing the answer. Jian Luo said, "It's nothing. It's just a flying insect that hit my eyes." "Oh," Ning Shu replied. She bumped into two eyes. He opened the door for Jian Luo. Jian Luo sat in the car. The car slowly drove past Jiang Yingyao, as if it was in slow motion. Jian Luo turned to look out of the window. She looked at Jiang Yingyao, who was like a sculpture. Her heart hurt so much that her breathing was a little messy. She turned her head. She couldn't bear to look, but she couldn't help but look in the rearview mirror. Jiang Yingyao was motionless. He had been in that position all the time. He seemed to have recovered and suddenly chased after the car. But how could a person's 2 legs compare to a car with 4 wheels? The car entered the traffic and directly left Jiang Yingyao behind. Ning Shu glanced at the rearview mirror and curled the corner of his mouth. His expression was normal. But Jian Luo's tears couldn't be controlled. They flowed down at once. She hurriedly wiped them. Ning Shu handed the handkerchief to Jian Luo. Although I don't know what you two talked about, I believe you. Although you have good memories before, there are also painful memories. These painful memories are between you two. It's better not to meet again in the future. We're going to get married. Then we have to clean up the past and start a new life. That's why I tolerated you two talking alone today. Promise me that we won't meet again in the future. People had a rebellious mentality. The more they were not allowed to do something, the more they wanted to do it. Ning Shu's current attitude was tyrannical, which made Jian Luo feel pressured. At the same time, there was an undetectable dissatisfaction in her heart. After returning from the hospital, Ning Shu began to busy himself with the wedding. Ning Shu was busy with the invitations and gifts. Jian Luo was not in the mood. She didn't feel happy from the beginning to the end. It was as if this was Ning Shu's wedding. Jian Luo's face was full of melancholy. She didn't look like someone who was going to get married. If someone had a face, they would feel that they shouldn't get married and stop the wedding preparations. But Ning Shu seemed to be a person who didn't know how to look. Not only did he not stop the wedding, but he also reported the progress to Jian Luo from time to time. For example, the invitations had been written and the people he planned to invite. There was also the brand of the wedding candy gift box, which made Jian Luo even more worried. Ning Shu also liked to talk about these things at the dinner table. Ning Shu talked with great enthusiasm. His face was full of anticipation for the wedding. This made Jian Luo feel like she was sitting on pins and needles. She couldn't eat. Every day, facing Jian Luo's face, she couldn't eat. Ning Shu also deliberately talked about it during the meal so that she couldn't eat. Chapter 36-36. Come on, let's hurt each other. As the wedding approached, Jian Luo became more and more absent-minded and out of sorts. Her heart was filled with worries. Once a person worried too much, they would easily become haggard. If her appetite was not good, she would look even more haggard. Contrary to Jian Luo, Ning Shu was in high spirits. She was in high spirits. Ning Shu wanted to let the whole world know that he was getting married. He sent invitations to all the employees in the company, even to Jiang Yingyao. As for Jiang Yingyao's expression when he received the invitation, Ning Shu did not care at all. In short, for this wedding, as long as they knew the client, they knew that he was getting married and they all congratulated him. There were also some close friends who asked Ning Shu if she really wanted to marry Jian Luo. Jian Luo looked like she had a lot on her mind. No one knew what was on her mind. Looking at her expression, it was as if the sky was going to fall in the next second. Was he really happy living with such a woman? Ning Shu smiled like a fool. He was happy, very happy. His friends shook their heads and looked at Ning Shu as if he was a fool. In short, Ning Shu looked very smug and told everyone. If he could not get married, the bride would be with someone else. He would be the pitiful person who was abandoned, the weak party. Even if the two of them were together, they would have to bear the strange gazes of others. Those who knew Fei Wen basically knew Jian Luo. Jian Luo's life had been smooth all these years. The client's connections had also helped a lot. Moreover, the Jiang family was also part of the upper class. Everyone saw each other frequently. Although Jiang Yingyao was now a civil servant, he was still a member of the Jiang family. Jiang Yingyao was doing very well because of the Jiang family. He was not short of money. When he was free, he would treat his subordinates to delicious food and give them small gifts. Ning Shu wanted to make it known to everyone, and Jian Luo had no way to back down. The more she delayed, the more troublesome it would be. But if she really got married, she would probably be unwilling. But did Ning Shu do anything wrong? No, they had been together all these years. They were also engaged. Marriage was a matter of course. The client did not betray Jian Luo, cheat on her, or have any other bad habits. Wasn't it good for Jian Luo? Of course. Therefore, it was Jian Luo's fault that Fei Wen was abandoned. You say you don't love me? Then why didn't you say you didn't love her earlier? You had already eaten her dry, used her money, used her resources, and achieved success. Then, you said you didn't love her. Ning Shu smiled. Perfect. Ning Shu's footsteps were light as if he was about to fly into the sky. Jian Luo wanted to say something but stopped. Seeing Ning Shu's happy expression, she couldn't open her mouth in the end. He couldn't bear to hurt Ning Shu, but he couldn't go against his heart. The more Ning Shu pressured her, the stronger the resistance in Jian Luo's heart. The more uncomfortable it was. Ning Shu had heard Jian Luo sobbing in the room more than once, but she still pretended not to hear it. Oh, Jian Luo could not open her mouth. She felt guilty. Did she have to wait for her to speak? What do you mean by seeing you in pain? I'm in pain too, so I'll let you go and be with the person you like. The wedding will be cancelled. Ning Shu, haha. Did you want her to say that? Then, you can be with someone else without any psychological burden. Not only did you let the abandoned person suffer, but you also let the hurt person be understanding and say things that you didn't want to say. You let me go yourself. I didn't want to go. TSK, couldn't people be more kind? He had spent so much money to marry Jian Luo. Even if she was a scary doll, he could still put her at home as a decoration. The flower that he had spent so much effort to water was taken away just like that. Furthermore, he had to be shamelessly given up. What kind of joke was that? What? Love was to fulfill their wish? Then why couldn't Jiang Yingyao fulfill their wish? Why did Fei Wen have to fulfill their wish? He even had the nerve to let someone else speak first. What kind of daydream was that? In these 10 days, Jian Luo's face had become skinny. Her cheekbones had become much higher, and the chubbier that she had grown before was gone. She obviously looked dispirited and was about to become autistic again. But Ning Shu still didn't cancel the wedding. Sometimes, Jian Luo would put on makeup for herself and come back with swollen eyes. As for who she went to see, Ning Shu knew very well. Ning Shu said to Jian Luo with concern, "The wedding will be in a few days. Don't go out for a while. Take care of yourself." "Oh right, let's go get the certificate tomorrow," Ning Shu said with a smile. Jian Luo moved her lips and said, "We can wait for a while. There's no need to rush. Let's wait until after the wedding." Ning Shu sneered in her heart. She frowned slightly and said, "It's the same. Let's get the certificate first. Then we'll officially be husband and wife. As for the wedding, it's just a ceremony to let others know that you're my wife." Jian Luo could only nod. At night, she paced around Ning Shu's door and finally knocked on Ning Shu's door. Ning Shu ignored her. He covered his head with the quilt and pretended not to hear. Jian Luo finally mustered up the courage to knock on Ning Shu's door, but Ning Shu did not open the door. Her strength that she had mustered up with much difficulty dissipated. She couldn't knock on Ning Shu's door anymore. After standing at the door for a long time, Jian Luo returned to her room. Ning Shu slept very well that night, but Jian Luo looked like she didn't sleep at all. There were dark circles under her eyes and she looked haggard. People would believe that someone died at home. She didn't look like someone who was about to get married. Ning Shu asked, "Did you not sleep well last night? Were you too excited?" Jian Luo wanted to ask Ning Shu why he didn't open the door, but she didn't seem to be in a position to question him. Ning Shu put the breakfast on the table and said, "We'll go to the Civil Affairs Bureau after eating." Jian Luo clutched the glass of milk and almost cried. Jian Luo raised her head and took a deep breath. She said to Ning Shu, "Feiwen, I have something to tell you." "Oh, go ahead." Ning Shu bit into his sandwich and said carelessly. He wanted to force Jian Luo to say it, not force her to back out. "Come on, accept the interrogation of your soul." If Jian Luo was completely shameless and kicked the client away without any psychological burden, it would be fine. If she was a complete scum, it would be fine. But Jian Luo seemed to be kind. Conscience or heart, make your choice. Jian Luo was a little scared when Ning Shu looked at her. She swallowed nervously and said, "Feiwen, can we get married later?" "I'm not ready yet." Ning Shu asked faintly, "When will you be ready?" "It's been so many years." "Are you still not ready?" The client had been with Jian Luo for so many years. Shouldn't Jian Luo be ready to be his wife? Chapter 36-37. When it came to marriage, all kinds of problems would come out. Ning Shu said to Jian Luo, "Can you give me a reason for postponing the marriage certificate? A suitable reason for me to face such a blow when I am about to get married. Or you don't want to marry me?" Jian Luo hesitated for a while. "It's not like that." Ning Shu, "Then what is it? Tell me. You know that all my friends, company partners, and employees in the company all know that I am going to get married. Even the date has been set. If I suddenly have to postpone it, how can I face others?" Jian Luo said, "We are the ones who are living our lives, not for them to see. Why should we listen to what outsiders say about our matters?" Ning Shu raised his handsome eyebrows. "That's true, but humans are social animals. They want to obtain all kinds of glory and psychological satisfaction in the group, and they also care about their reputation in the group. Don't care what others think. How do I make money and run the company? Our marriage is not just a matter between the two of us. Ning Shu, you are in a dilemma." Jian Luo exhaled and decided to tell Ning Shu the truth. I haven't thought about marrying you yet. When I saw Jiang Yingyao again, I found that I still have feelings for him. There were feelings of love, sadness, and all kinds of emotions. Jian Luo felt like she was a living person. Ning Shu looked at her with a dumbfounded expression. He put down the half-eaten sandwich, took a sip of milk and said, "Jian Luo, I found that you are floating. Jiang Yingyao is your first love, but do you know what happened between the two of you? It is a scar that can't be healed." Jian Luo said, "But I am just, he is a ray of light in my life." Shining through the gap, she had lived for more than 10 years, and had been living in the malicious words of the people around her. He walked in. Pain is one thing, but more than that, it is warmth. Ning Shu sighed. There was nothing he could do about it. People would only remember the first person. Over the years, the person who entrusted her was also a ray of light into Jian Luo's life. Moreover, it was shining in all directions, but she only remembered Jiang Yingyao. Moreover, the two of them hadn't been together for long. Jian Luo had encountered this because of Jiang Yingyao. If she hadn't met Jiang Yingyao, she wouldn't have been captured because of saving Jiang Yingyao. Jiang Yingyao had brought her harm, but the person who had entrusted her with it hadn't. Ning Shu smirked and said with a malicious tone, "Do you think that you won't be affected by that matter when you're together? When the two of you sleep on the same bed, Jiang Yingyao won't remember the scene of you being raped. But when the two of you are intimate, will you remember the scene of Jiang Yingyao watching you from the side when you were hurt? Your sex life will not be harmonious." Ning Shu's words were rough and unpleasant. Jian Luo's face immediately turned red, and she couldn't speak for a long time. "Let's not talk about the problems between the two of you first. Do you think the Jiang family will accept you? When you were stranded in a foreign country, it was the Jiang family's elders who did it. Do you think they will accept you and let a tainted woman become the wife of the Jiang family? When the two of you are together, not only do you have to bear the pain brought by the memories, but you also have to face the strange eyes of the Jiang family. They may even use this matter to mock you. You have too many flaws. Your father is a ferocious murderer, and you yourself had an accident because of saving someone. Although you were trying to save Jiang Yingyao, you were still hurt by the bad guys. Understanding is one thing, but whether they accept it or not is another. Your scars have been exposed again and again. You are the one who is in pain, and others will only clap their hands and cheer because your existence will stain the Jiang family. They are mocked, and then they will turn to mock you. Can you bear it? You have been receiving psychological counseling all these years. It seems that the counseling is too good, so you still have such thoughts. Moreover, you were my fiancé before, and the Jiang family has to bear the joke of stealing someone else's wife. Don't say that your love can conquer everything. On the contrary, these external factors will only wear down the love between the two of you. You will think that it would have been better if you had not married him. He will think that it would have been better if he had not married you. Marriage is a matter between two families. Your family is very unbearable. Even if you have the title of a designer now, there are some things that can't be erased. I am different. I am an illegitimate child, and the Jiang family will not care about me. If I marry you, they will only be happy. And the two of us are people who have no elders. We can close the door and live our own lives comfortably. Ning Shu said a lot of things, and his mouth was dry. He picked up the milk and gulped down half a cup, and said, "Think about it yourself. No matter who you marry, it will be better than being with Jiang Yingyao. If you really insist on being with Jiang Yingyao, you will what?" Jian Luo looked at Ning Shu expectantly, and her eyes burst out a bright light. She felt that she had said so much in vain. If Jian Luo had thought it through, it would have been fine. But she insisted on doing this, which made Ning Shu very unhappy. They were both women. Ning Shu said everything he wanted to say, but Jian Luo did not listen at all. The Jiang family could tolerate Jiang Yingyao becoming a public official because of what happened in the past. Jiang Yingyao and the elders of the Jiang family quarreled, and the elders tolerated it. However, if Jiang Yingyao wanted to marry Jian Luo, the Jiang family would have to be stupid to agree to it. There was shit in the hole, and there was poison in the shit. Ning Shu said, "I will never let you have an easy time." Ning Shu's harsh words made Jian Luo a little surprised. Because Fei Wen was a gentle person, when he said such harsh words, it made people feel that he was throwing a tantrum. Ning Shu said, "I am serious. All these years, I have been with you. I have poured all my efforts and resources into you. If it were not for me, you would be living like a beggar in a foreign country. How could you have such a good life?" Jian Luo bit her lips. She was very embarrassed because what he said was the truth, and Jian Luo could not deny it. "Are you going to settle the score with me?" He said he liked her, but now he was being so calculative, and Jian Luo did not like it. Ning Shu said, "Do you think I am a philanthropist? I spent so much effort on you because I like you. Are you going to tell me that I am not calculating well, and that love is selfless? If it was not selfless, then it was not true love." Chapter 36-38. What kind of concept was it that there was such an empty and rootless true love? Love that could not be based on material things was like an attic in the sky. Where did this concept of selflessness come from? Even if parents raised and nurtured their children, it was just to prepare for their retirement. Otherwise, why would some people try so hard to give birth to boys? Because the girl would belong to someone else's family in the future, and only boys could be relied on in their old age. Even family members needed each other and cared about each other. This relationship between strangers, and it had a very short duration, actually required selflessness. Selflessness for your whole family. Ning Shu stood up, leaned forward, reached out his hand to lift Jian Luo's chin, smiled and said, "You said selfless, then can you love me selflessly?" Jian Luo was stunned for a moment, but you don't love me. Selfless dedication to the person you like is happiness. Dedication to the person you don't love is torture. Ning Shu said lightly. From now on, then I will stop my dedication. All your design proposals in the company will not be approved, and you used my connections to become a student of a well-known designer. From now on, you don't need to use my connections and name to participate in various design exchanges. Use your own name. You don't need to go to the company. You will be suspended without pay, but you will keep your position as a designer in the company. Also, please move out and find a house on your own. Why, you look very surprised. Ning Shu smiled. You told me very clearly that you don't want to marry me, and you don't love me. Do you want me to be selfless for you? You are wasting other people's lives and time. I have to stop the loss immediately, find someone who loves me again, and get out of this rotten swamp. Jian Luo was extremely embarrassed. She was shocked and sad by Ning Shu's heartlessness. Of course, if you decide to marry me, you can continue to enjoy these privileges. Jian Luo was speechless. She was angry, but she was in no position to blame Ning Shu. This was the most infuriating thing. Jian Luo was full of guilt towards him. She did not recognize Jiang Yingyao before because she did not want Fei Wen to be sad, so she endured it. Seeing him like this, the guilt in Jian Luo's heart was reduced by a lot. You keep saying that, I keep saying that I love you, but I'm calculating these things. I can't selflessly dedicate myself to you and made you so angry. I'm sorry. Ning Shu spread out his hands and leaned back in his chair. Jian Luo said helplessly, I know you're angry, but you don't have to be like this. If I were to betray you today and get together with another woman before our wedding, I'm afraid you would jump into the sky and call me a big scumbag. It's already like this. If I still ask you to selflessly contribute to me and eat your food, I'm afraid you're spitting on my face. Put yourself in my shoes. If you were me, how would you feel? Ning Shu's face was covered with frost. Scram, Jian Luo was shocked, and humiliation flashed across her face. Being told to scram in such a blatant manner, with a strong sense of humiliation, Jian Luo could not stand it. Jian Luo was used to Fei Wen's kindness, and such a big contrast made Jian Luo extremely angry. The previous good feelings had disappeared, and now there was only Ning Shu's bad treatment of her in her heart. Jian Luo covered her mouth and rushed upstairs. She went to the room to pack her things. She stuffed the things into the box in a mess, and the clothes and jewelry were rolled into a ball. Jian Luo carried the box downstairs and did not even look at Ning Shu. She walked straight away. Ning Shu said, "Wait." Jian Luo turned around and looked at Ning Shu. She asked sarcastically, "Do you have anything else to say?" Ning Shu said coldly, "Open the box. Some things are given to you by me. You're not allowed to take away my things. Actually, speaking of which, I bought all the clothes you're wearing for you. I got someone to tailor them for you. If I were a little more heartless, you would have gone out naked. You." Jian Luo was helpless. "Do you have to be like this?" "Of course. You seem to have forgotten that you cheated on me. I should be ashamed. I'm too good to you. If I'm not good to you, you still throw a tantrum. Who are you to me now? Who the hell spoils you? Open the box. Don't make me say it a second time." Jian Luo put down the box and opened it. "Look. There's something for you in here." Ning Shu glanced at it. "Leave the jewelry. As for the clothes, leave them too." Jian Luo had been living a quiet life all these years. The clothes were the latest style sent home and directly put on Fei Wen's account. She was also given some jewelry from time to time. He just hoped that Jian Luo would be happy. Every time Jian Luo received something, she would be indifferent and thank the sender. Therefore, Jian Luo only had the right to use these things, but not the right to own them. Jian Luo looked at Ning Shu, dumbfounded. How can you be like this? What about me? Didn't I buy these things? I paid for them. You can find out where these clothes came from. Are these yours? Did you pay for them? Jian Luo was speechless and left the box. She was a little suspicious why Ning Shu was suddenly so heartless. She couldn't help but wonder. Did you want to break up with me long ago? That was why such a thing happened. She couldn't stand it so that she would take the initiative to leave. This was a typical girl's mind. Ning Shu laughed. Not everyone is like you. I'm very angry now. I didn't kill you. I controlled myself. I'm already very calm. If you were betrayed by me now, you would probably want to kill me. I feel the same way now. I'm doing this to tell you that everything I gave you, everything you enjoyed, you can only enjoy it with me. If you're not with me, don't think about enjoying it anymore. You're too. Jian Luo was very embarrassed, as if she had been slapped in the face. Ning Shu said, I said it too straightforwardly and did it too directly. You can't stand it, right? You don't want to admit that you've been relying on me all these years. You think that it's just your own hard work. Hard work. Without resources, without the guidance of a famous teacher, you'd still be serving tea and washing dishes in some restaurant. Ning Shu said, you can go now. Jian Luo turned and left. Her footsteps were slow. Ning Shu glanced at her and didn't call out to her. I don't love you. What does your mood have to do with me? Since you're willing to be abused with Jiang Yingyao, then be together. It's a virtue to help others. He finally drove Jian Luo out. He didn't have to face her constipated face. Chapter 36-39. In front of Jian Luo, he couldn't even eat well. Now he was relaxed. Ning Shu stretched. Once Jian Luo left, the energy in the house became relaxed and cheerful. Negative energy was transmitted much faster than positive energy. For example, if you're happy and smiling, then the person you're talking to looks at you with a displeased expression. At this time, no matter how happy you were, you couldn't help but wonder what was wrong with this person. Then you would have all kinds of guesses. Your happy mood has been spoiled. Ning Shu felt that the only lucky thing about Fei Wen was that he was rich and had more resources. If Fei Wen was an ordinary man, with an ordinary appearance and an ordinary salary, he would have spent all his money on Jian Luo. In the end, Fei Wen chose another man. He would lose both his money and his wife. Just like the males in the natural world, in order to compete for a mate, they didn't rely on money, but their strong bodies. Defeating the opponent was extremely risky. It was very likely that they would be killed by the opponent. In order to obtain the right to mate with a female that belonged directly to him, he would strive for the female to give birth to offspring with his genes. This was a natural selection process. Even if you snatched the female, there were still many males eyeing you. Females were born with the right to choose. They could choose to be with a strong male to ensure that their offspring would have strong genes. It could be said that in order to reproduce, males had to pay the price of their lives. Humans had emotions. They were not so cruel, but the essence was the same. However, Fei Wen's ending was not good. In this way, Fei Wen was a loser. A loser in the battle for a mate, but he was unwilling to accept it. She had to act early to stop the damage. As for Jian Luo choosing someone else, he would be an idiot if he gave up without any regrets. It didn't make sense. If he wanted to get back after giving up so much, he would rush up and snatch her back. If he didn't want to snatch her back, he would just cut off the connection. Jian Luo left Ning Shu's house and didn't know where to go for a while. Jian Luo's life was arranged clearly by Fei Wen. Travel, choice of place, hotel, etc., were all arranged by Fei Wen. Moreover, Fei Wen had many subordinates. With just a word from Fei Wen, his subordinates would do the job properly. Jian Luo did not need to do anything at all. It was very convenient. But now, Jian Luo was alone and had no friends around her. She had to find a house by herself, find a place to eat by herself, and do all the miscellaneous chores by herself. Jian Luo looked at the heavy traffic and was at a loss for a moment. She did not know where to go or where to go. Dependence was a habit. Jian Luo had already gotten used to Fei Wen's existence. Even though she liked Jiang Yingyao, she had to leave a comfortable environment. First, he felt uncomfortable physically. Then, he felt uncomfortable psychologically. Giving up something that one was used to would be very uncomfortable. Jian Luo immediately took out her phone. She swiped her thumb across the screen and looked at the name on the screen. Her finger immediately tapped on Fei Wen's name. This had been a habit for many years, and Fei Wen's name was always at the top of Jian Luo's phone book. But just as he was about to click on it, Jian Luo's thumb stopped. Humph, they had just quarreled. If he called her now, wouldn't he seem weak? And Fei Wen had already asked her to leave. If she went back with her tail between her legs, it would be really embarrassing. Jian Luo scrolled down until she saw Jiang Yingyao's name. She stopped when she was about to tap on it. She did not want Jiang Yingyao to see her in such a sorry state. And Jian Luo had almost no such awareness in the face of scandals. She probably thought that Fei Wen had seen her in her worst state. No matter what she was like, Fei Wen should like her. But facing Jiang Yingyao, Jian Luo was not sure if he really liked her or loved her. She had to maintain her best state in front of him. Jian Luo had no place to stay. She could not find an apartment quickly, so she found a hotel to stay in. These years, Jian Luo's material life was very good. She basically had the best and never had to worry about food, clothing, housing, and transportation. She found the best hotel to stay in and then began to look for an apartment. Jian Luo thought that it was too troublesome to find an apartment, so she prepared to buy one. When she asked about the price, she was shocked. Although Jian Luo lived a good life, it was Fei Wen who paid for it. Jian Luo had only started to earn money in the last 2 or 3 years. She only became a professional designer 2 or 3 years ago. She started to work and earn money in Fei Wen's company. The salary was not high or low. This was also because Fei Wen opened the back door and often used her design concept. In 2 or 3 years, it was still impossible for Jian Luo to buy an apartment in the city center of a first-tier city on her own. At least she would have to struggle for a long time. When Jian Luo heard the price, she waved her hand and left. The salesperson also rolled her eyes. Jian Luo was very embarrassed. It had been a long time since someone rolled their eyes at her. Since she could not afford an apartment, Jian Luo could only rent an apartment, a better one. Besides, even if she bought an apartment, she had to renovate it. She still did not live in it. In short, she still had to rent an apartment. For the whole day, Jian Luo ran around the real estate agency. The apartments she saw were either too small, too far from the city center, or too ugly. After all these years of living like a princess, Jian Luo did not like messy apartments. Annoyed by these trivial matters, Jian Luo's heart was incomparably stuffy, and she was also a little resentful towards Ning Shu. Jian Luo took out her mobile phone and called Jiang Yingyao. Jiang Yingyao, who received the call, appeared in front of Jian Luo as fast as he could. Seeing that Jian Luo was in a bad mood and looked tired, he asked what happened. Jian Luo sighed and told him about the conflict between her and her fiancé. She was kicked out. Jiang Yingyao endured the sadness and said angrily, "No matter what happened, he should not kick a girl like you out of the house. What if something dangerous happened?" Jiang Yingyao could not imagine that if something happened to Jian Luo, he would go crazy. More than 10 years ago, that incident had already caused him great pain. If something happened to Jian Luo, who was very similar to her, Jiang Yingyao felt that he would go crazy. As for the next thing, Jiang Yingyao and Jian Luo looked for an apartment together. With the person they liked by their side, it was much easier to do things together. Jiang Yingyao hesitated and asked, "What happened to make him kick you out?" This was a matter between lovers. Jiang Yingyao felt that he should not ask. Chapter 36-40. But he couldn't help but want to ask. Jiang Yingyao had hope in his heart. Jian Luo stared at him. "Because I said that I suddenly don't want to marry him." Jiang Yingyao couldn't believe it. His eyes were filled with great surprise. He forced himself to calm down. "Why?" "Because I'm Lu Jing." Jian Luo said. "Lu Jing, Lu Jing." Jiang Yingyao felt as if an arrow had pierced through his heart. His mind was filled with Lu Jing's name, making him unable to react normally. He stood there in a daze. "Sorry, I changed my name." Jian Luo said. Jiang Yingyao suddenly squatted down and buried his head between his arms. His body trembled slightly as if he was crying. Jian Luo didn't expect his reaction. She had thought of many possibilities. Jiang Yingyao might question her, or he might be happy, but he was crying. Jiang Yingyao calmed himself down and wiped his tears. "Now that you're in front of me, I only feel happy and lucky. I'm sorry." Jiang Yingyao breathed a sigh of relief. The burden that had been on him all these years seemed to have lightened a little. Jiang Yingyao reached out and hugged her. "Thank God that I can still meet you." Jian Luo leaned into Jiang Yingyao's arms and listened to his heartbeat. She had never felt so peaceful before. Ning Shu was very busy. He was busy calling everyone to tell them that his wedding was cancelled and he didn't have to come to the wedding. Because there was no bride. Before the wedding, the bride had to know her own feelings. She loved someone else. The people who received the call were speechless. Fuck, this was too much. How could they comfort this miserable man? They could only persuade Ning Shu that it was better to be clear with you before the wedding than to mess around behind your back after the wedding. You're so good, you'll definitely meet someone better. A man doesn't have to worry about not having a wife. Ning Shu was speechless as he listened to these people's comforting words. Was he still thanking Jian Luo for telling him before the wedding? As an abandoned person, Ning Shu was the perfect example of decadence. He was too lazy to go to work. Anyway, it was fine if he wasn't in the company for a few days. At the same time, he turned off his phone. As a missing person, he had to cut off all contact with the outside world. Of course, a secretary ran to Ning Shu's villa and said to Ning Shu in a very sad tone, "President Fei, Jian Luo came to the company to resign." She packed her things and left. I think the person waiting for her is a man. Above Boss Fei's head was a patch of lush green grass, and there were many alpacas on it. The secretary looked at Ning Shu with pity. She handed in her resignation letter. I said that Boss Fei was not around and it was not easy to approve it. Then Jian Luo said that she would not come to the company whether you approved it or not. Ning Shu was very dispirited. His eyes were bloodshot. He had smoked a lot of onions. The secretary didn't know how to comfort him. Ning Shu said, "Then send her a lawyer's letter. Ask the company's lawyer to send her one. According to the labor law, she can be investigated in her current situation." It was fine if he didn't take this matter seriously. Even if he did, there was evidence to back it up. The secretary looked at Ning Shu with even more pity. She felt that Ning Shu was doing this to keep Jian Luo. However, seeing that Jian Luo looked relaxed and happy as she left with another man, Boss Fei felt that his efforts were useless. Ning Shu didn't care what Jian Luo wanted to do. He wanted to use this opportunity to get something back from Jian Luo. He wanted her to pay a price. Although he might not get much back and Jiang Yingyao might pay for him, it was good that he could annoy Jian Luo. Although it looked like she was doing this out of love and could not get what she wanted. Jian Luo would probably be with Jiang Yingyao with a clear conscience. Instead of giving without complaints, Jian Luo was still with Jiang Yingyao. It was better to make Jian Luo give something back. The secretary went to do it. Before she left, she encouraged Ning Shu and told him to pull himself together. There were still so many people waiting for Ning Shu in the company. These subordinates wanted Ning Shu to be well more than Jian Luo so that they could have a foothold. Ning Shu said, "I know. I'll go back to the company after I'm done." The secretary patted Ning Shu's shoulder. As a man, the secretary understood this feeling very well. He had been feeding dogs for so many years. Even if he fed dogs, the dogs would still get close to the person who fed them. Humans had emotions, but they were also much crueler. Under the secretary's pitiful gaze, Ning Shu felt that his acting was not good enough. He should go to the company tomorrow. Let the rumors and gossip spread further. Ning Shu stayed up all night and made himself look more haggard. He tossed and turned in bed and forced himself not to sleep. It was not easy for him to stay up until dawn. Ning Shu quickly got up. Although he was tidy, the haggard look on his face could not be hidden. As soon as Ning Shu arrived at the company, from the security guards at the company's gate to the company's top management, they all looked at Ning Shu with pity. Their eyes were full of pity, but they had to pretend that they did not care. They treated Ning Shu as usual, but this was even more awkward. They talked behind her back, but when they saw her coming, they pretended to be very normal. They looked like they wanted to comfort her, but they were afraid that they would hurt her heart. Ning Shu directly locked himself in the office. He was too lazy to look at these people. He felt tired for them. Ning Shu looked at the document. Suddenly the door was opened. Someone broke in without knocking first. Ning Shu looked at the intruder very unhappily. It was Jian Luo. Jian Luo walked to the desk in high heels. She slammed the lawyer's letter on the table and asked, "What's going on?" Ning Shu said, "Can't you read? If you can't understand the content, then hire a lawyer and let the lawyer explain it to you." Jian Luo said. "You know what I'm talking about. I'm asking you, why did you do this?" Ning Shu said, "Because you violated the labor contract. Although you were suspended, you were not fired, so the labor relationship still exists. You handed in your resignation letter, but I did not reply. You resigned unilaterally. And you have been in the company for a while, and you have come into contact with some of the company's confidential designs and ideas. I don't know if you will leak it and affect my company." Jian Luo was a little angry. "You know what kind of person I am. How can I leak the company's secrets?" Ning Shu shrugged. "How would I know? People change at will. For example, between us, it's been so many years. It's been almost 10 years. It really changes at will. You're telling me this. Find a lawyer." Ning Shu looked at her coldly. "Get out. You broke in without knocking. You are very unscrupulous to me. Do you think I will tolerate you no matter what?" Jian Luo bit her lip and turned to leave with the lawyer's letter. When she walked to the door, she looked back at Ning Shu. "Fei Wen, I'm sorry. P.S. Readers, I am very pretentious. I recommend a free app that supports downloading, listening to books, zero ads, and multiple reading modes. Dear readers, please pay attention to this matter." Chapter 3641. A simple apology could cancel out all the things that had happened between them. Apologies did not have that much power. Stabbing someone and putting on a band-aid would make the scars disappear. People who apologized generously were bearing their own pain and magnanimous. But if others did not choose to forgive, it was because the pain was too much. They did not know how painful it was to be stabbed with a knife. Ning Shu said lightly, "I accept your apology, but I will not forgive you." Saying sorry was just to make herself feel better. "I have repented and apologized." Jian Luo pursed her lips and sniffed. "Fei Wen, I know that no matter what I do, I can't make up for the harm I've done to you." Ning Shu was really annoyed with Jian Luo. "Since you've decided to hurt me, you're doing everything you can to repent. You want to have a clear conscience and want to be with the person you like. There's no such thing as having the best of both worlds. In a threesome, one person is destined to be hurt. The damage has already been done. What's the point of saying these words? You're saying that you're kind, but you didn't mean it. You've already made your choice. Don't be so hypocritical. If I were the one who ran away with another woman, you'd be the one who got hurt. Why would I say these words in front of you? I'm afraid you'll think that I still have ulterior motives towards you and treat you as a spare tire. Are you doing this to leave yourself a way out? Since you've already hurt me, why don't you be a little more ruthless? Don't be so wishy-washy." Jian Luo was speechless. Why didn't she realize that this guy's words were so harsh? It was so direct that it was hard to accept. She just wanted Fei Wen to be less hurt, but it seemed that Fei Wen was hurt even more. Jian Luo was at a loss. She just didn't want him to be hurt and tried her best to do something. Jian Luo used her own way of thinking. She wanted everyone to be happy, that would be the best. She was actually standing on the side of the winner, as if she was showing pity for the injured loser. But this kind of care was more uncomfortable than no care at all. This kind of seeming right and wrong, as well as being neither close nor distant, simply leaving, directly abandoning, although it was painful and hateful, it also directly cut off the hope of others. Jian Luo took a deep breath and said, "Fei Wen, I've decided to be with Jiang Yingyao." Ning Shu, "Oh, I won't give you my blessings." Jian Luo did not expect to receive Ning Shu's blessings, so she turned and left. Being able to be friends after being separated was basically a legend. Unless they reconciled. Ning Shu rolled his eyes and snorted. "Who cares what you guys do? If you want to be together, then be together." However, now that the two of them were together, every time they saw each other, they would be reminded of what had happened more than 10 years ago. Looking at the other party was like looking at pain. What was the point? Jiang Yingyao and Jian Luo broke through the window paper and got together. His speed was very fast, causing those who knew about this matter to look at Ning Shu with even more pity. They got together so quickly. How long had Fei Wen been cuckolded? What a pity, what a pity. Some of the friends who felt injustice for Ning Shu, when they saw Jian Luo, they sneered and ridiculed her, making Jian Luo speechless. Moreover, the things that these people said, one by one, were things that Jian Luo could not deny. His girlfriend was being ridiculed, so Jiang Yingyao naturally had to defend her. When Jiang Yingyao spoke, although the people around him were a little hesitant, their expressions were still vague and disdainful. Although Jiang Yingyao was not in the business world, the Jiang family was still very famous in the business world. Because of the Jiang family, they gave Jiang Yingyao some face and did not say anything unpleasant. However, in their hearts, they were still cursing this adulterous couple. This woman was also not a good thing, she still wanted to climb up the Jiang family. Jian Luo felt as if she had been engraved with Fei Wen's mark. Wherever she went, those who knew her and those who knew Fei Wen would look at her with condemnation. It was as if she was some kind of rebellious person. She felt guilty towards Fei Wen, she felt that she owed him, but this feeling was very uncomfortable and even became an inner demon. She felt that only when the inner demon disappeared would this feeling disappear. In order to avoid meeting acquaintances, Jian Luo did not like to go out. Even if she went on dates with Jiang Yingyao, they would go to mid-range restaurants and not those who went to high-end restaurants. Although she had already left Fei Wen, she felt that Fei Wen's shackles were so strong that she was not free. At this time, Jian Luo faintly felt that all these years, Fei Wen had weaved a kind of gentle cage for her. He introduced her to all his friends and used his own resources to pave the way for her. Unless she left this level and did not associate with people of this level, she could feel it. However, Jiang Yingyao was at this level, she could not avoid it. After choosing Jiang Yingyao, everyone knew that she had left Fei Wen. It was impossible for her to abandon Jiang Yingyao and be with Fei Wen. How did things become like this? Jian Luo had changed her name. Her past had been buried and no one knew about it. Therefore, these people did not know about Jian Luo's past. However, others did not know, but those who were interested would investigate, such as the Jiang family. Old Madame Jiang said to her grandson, "I heard that you have a girlfriend. Bring her home." Jiang Yingyao was a little hesitant. If he brought Jian Luo back, the past would be mentioned again. It would be difficult for his family to accept Jian Luo. More than 10 years ago, it was them who caused him to be separated from Jian Luo for so many years. They caused him to bear the guilt and pain for so many years. Jiang Yingyao said, after a while. She is the daughter of an ordinary family. She does not know my identity. Old Madame Jiang's stern face was full of wrinkles. She looked ferocious. Then are you going to be like your grandfather and father, sneaking around like this? The men of the Jiang family are all like this. They are all old and shameless. When old Madame Jiang talked about the men of the Jiang family, her face was full of resentment. Jiang Yingyao had no choice but to choose a time to bring Jian Luo back to meet his parents. Sooner or later, they would have to meet. He would definitely marry Jian Luo. The men of the Jiang family seemed to be a little presumptuous when it came to women. For example, Jiang Yingyao's grandfather, in his 60s, had Fei Wen with his mistress. It was enough to show how shameless he was. Jiang Yingyao's father was a man of average ability. He was suppressed by his father to the point that he could not raise his head. He loved to show off his power on women and enjoy their worship. After his father died, he was controlled by his mother and could not raise his head. He became more and more unscrupulous when it came to women. However, when it came to Jiang Yingyao's generation, there seemed to be another type of lover. Jiang Yingyao was a lover. He just hoped that Jian Luo's identity would not be exposed. There was hope and luck in his heart. After all, Jian Luo's identity was perfect. Chapter 36-42. Everything in the past had been erased. Jian Luo's current identity was a child adopted by a foreign couple. Everything in the country had been erased. Jiang Yingyao felt that Fei Wen had done a perfect job. He had to admit. But Jiang Yingyao was unhappy. When Jian Luo was in the most pain, someone else was by her side. Actually, Jiang Yingyao also knew that Jian Luo's identity was not glorious. If she found out, the chances of them being together would be even smaller. Grandma was a strict woman. She would never allow him to marry Jian Luo. Jiang Yingyao hid Jian Luo's identity and did not dare to tell his family. He subconsciously felt that Jian Luo's background was not good. But he told himself that he was doing this to be with Jian Luo. In fact, the more he hid it, the more he cared. The darker the corner, the more moist and the easier it was to grow. It was sticky, greasy, and dirty. It spread out, and unknowingly, it had taken root in his body. Jiang Yingyao told Jian Luo that he would bring her home. Jian Luo's face turned pale. She remembered that she was saved after being hurt by bad people. The Jiang family looked at her as if she was dirty. They thanked her and said that they would reward her. But the condition was not to appear in front of Jiang Yingyao. There was no dirty person in the Jiang family. Dirty person? The scar in Jian Luo's heart was torn open violently. She was in so much pain that she trembled. She was afraid to see the Jiang family. She was afraid to see the Jiang family's eyes. Jian Luo timidly said that she wanted to wait. Jiang Yingyao knew what Jian Luo was afraid of. But if they wanted to get married, the old madam had to say it. Chapter 36-43, Going home. This meant that their fate was in the hands of Grandma. Jiang Yingyao held Jian Luo's cold hands and said, "Grandma wants to see you. She has arranged for this weekend." Jian Luo was still hesitant. Jiang Yingyao said, "If we want to be together, we have to go through Grandma. I'm sorry that you've been wronged. For me, for our future, let's meet our family. If anything happens, I will take you away immediately. I won't let you be wronged." Hearing Jiang Yingyao's words, Jian Luo's heart was filled with sweetness and courage. She nodded. These few days, Jian Luo had been busy with her appearance. What should she wear to meet Jiang Yingyao's family? She could not be too revealing. She had to dress modestly and gracefully. There was the problem of going back and forth to determine the style, and also the problem of choosing a gift. After going back and forth to choose, it wasn't that the price was not satisfactory, but that the gift was too ordinary. But if it was something too expensive, if Jian Luo paid for it herself, she might have to spend all her money. After all, the members of the Jiang family were all rich. They had never seen anything before. If it was something too ordinary, what would others think? Jian Luo gritted her teeth and accepted the more expensive gift. Even if it was for herself and Jiang Yingyao, it was worth it. Jiang Yingyao was shocked when he saw the gift Jian Luo bought. He asked her why she bought such an expensive gift. Jian Luo did not say anything. If it was not an expensive gift, the Jiang family would not accept it. Jian Luo's heart was filled with apprehension and uneasiness towards the Jiang family members she was about to meet. She felt that the Jiang family would not accept her at all. Her fate with Jiang Yingyao was full of misfortune. On Sunday, Jian Luo dressed herself up beautifully and went to Jiang Yingyao's house with gifts. As soon as she arrived at the castle-like villa, Jian Luo felt that it was difficult to breathe. Her entire body was trembling, and she could not sit still. When he entered the living room, he saw a stern-looking old lady sitting on the sofa. Jian Luo recognized her at a glance. She was much older in the past. Jiang Yingyao held Jian Luo's hand and walked in front of old Madame Jiang. He introduced Jian Luo to her. Old Madame Jiang looked at Jian Luo and said lightly, "You look just like when you were young." As soon as old Madame Jiang said this, Jian Luo's face turned pale. Her body was on the verge of collapsing, and she almost fell to the ground. Jiang Yingyao supported her. Jiang Yingyao sighed. Sure enough, Grandma knew. He was hoping for a fluke, but he forgot that Grandma would investigate the people he was dating. It was the same 10 years ago, and it was the same 10 years later. Old Madame Jiang. Jian Luo shouted with a trembling voice. Jiang Yingyao said to Grandma in a pleading tone, "Grandma, I want to marry her. I want to be with her. I have been in pain for so many years. Only by being with her will I not be in pain." The heavy sense of guilt made him unable to bear it. Old Madame Jiang shook her head coldly. "No, she was raped by criminals. Her father is a cruel murderer. He is still in prison and will not be able to get out in this lifetime. Do you want to be laughed at for the rest of your life? She is a pile of shit. Once you touch her, it stinks." Old Madame Jiang used the coldest metaphor to describe Jian Luo. Jian Luo's face was not only pale, but also green and white. She was so ashamed that she wanted to die. "Grandma." Jiang Yingyao covered his head and groaned, "Don't say that. Old Madam, there is a guest outside." The maid walked in and said to old Madame Jiang. "Who is it?" Old Madame Jiang asked without hesitation. Her face was cold, making her look even fiercer. It's me. Ning Shu walked into the hall in his shiny black leather shoes. Old Madame Jiang saw Ning Shu and showed a deep disgust. What are you doing here? Ning Shu ignored old Madame Jiang's expression. He sat on the sofa and said, although you don't admit it, the blood of the Jiang family runs in my body. I heard that my nephew brought his niece-in-law to meet the parents, so I came to see. Old Madame Jiang sneered, get lost. What does everything in the Jiang family have to do with you? Your father died a long time ago. Ning Shu shrugged his shoulders. It was karma. Old Master Jiang indulged in women and as a result, his wife died many years ago. When the mother of the client, Fei Wen, saw the old man kneel down, she directly abandoned the young Fei Wen and found another way out. Fortunately, the old man saved a fund for the client and there was a professional to take care of it. In fact, if the client's mother stayed, she would not have to worry about food and clothing. However, she did not know. It seemed that old Master Jiang hid something from his mistress. Old Madame Jiang endured her husband and the old man died. Now that she had the Jiang family in her hands, it was a happy ending. As for the illegitimate son of the client, as long as he did not return to the Jiang family, old Madame Jiang did not kill him. Of course, she also despised him. If the son of a mistress could not marry into the family, it would be as difficult as ascending to heaven if he wanted to inherit the Jiang family. This was also the reason why the client was able to develop smoothly abroad. Ning Shu was not here to deal with old Madame Jiang, and he did not have any designs on the Jiang family's assets/BK. Chapter 36-43. Ning Shu came over to add bricks and tiles to the two's love story, building a thick barrier. At the same time, he came to find out Madame Jiang's opinion of Jian Luo. Looking at Jian Luo's tottering appearance, as if she was about to faint, this harsh and strict old Madame Jiang must have said some harsh and ear-piercing words. Madame Jiang's gaze was fixed on the sofa under Ning Shu's, but her face was full of disdain and disgust. She was afraid that after Ning Shu left, the sofa that Ning Shu sat on would be thrown away by Madame Jiang. It was indeed so. Madame Jiang especially hated Ning Shu, the child of that damned old man outside with another woman. A bastard with filthy blood flowing through his body had actually entered the house of his master. She even let her grandson marry such a woman. It was really shameful. Madame Jiang was a very strict person. She looked at everyone like this, except for her own child. However, even her own son could not raise his head under her pressure. She was not a gentle woman. But she seemed to like such an iron fist and did not like to be disobeyed. You have the blood of the Jiang family flowing in your body. Who has admitted it? Don't be wishful thinking. Otherwise, even what you have now, I can destroy for you. Madame Jiang's face was full of wrinkles. She was such an evil mother-in-law who scared children. Ning Shu sighed. I really want to be recognized by the Jiang family. Unfortunately, the Jiang family does not recognize me. I don't want my birth to be unknown. The client really did not want to return to the Jiang family. After all, he knew that returning to the Jiang family was a thankless task. So what if he was recognized by the Jiang family? So what if he was not recognized by the Jiang family? Why not be more carefree? Even his own mother could abandon him. How could the Jiang family, who regarded him as a thorn in their side, get a little bit of expectation from them? You have some self-awareness in your heart. You can go now. You casually break into other people's house. Sure enough, you are a bastard with a mother but no mother to teach you. Madame Jiang had always been unscrupulous in speaking to people she disliked. She would say whatever was unpleasant to hear. She had the power to kill her opponent with her words. She was temperamental, and others had to endure it. Her power in the Jiang family allowed her to not have to care about other people's feelings. It was probably because he had endured too much when he was young. Now that this damned old man was kneeling, he could no longer endure. Ning Shu's face darkened. He wasn't unhappy, but he wasn't happy either. The more old Madame Jiang acted like this, the more difficult it would be for Jian Luo. If old Madame Jiang knew that Jian Luo had such a past with him. Ning Shu stood up. Actually, I'm here today to see someone for the last time. In the end, my status is lower than others. Since nephew likes her, even if she is my fiancée, I will still give her to you. Ning Shu said with a sorrowful expression. I wish you all happiness. Were they here to give their blessings? Jiang Yingyao didn't expect Fei Wen to have such a relationship with him. Fei Wen was obviously here to mess things up. His grandfather's son. Therefore, the uncle and nephew fell in love with the same woman. The hostility between rivals in love and the rejection of the son of the mistress made Jiang Yingyao hate Ning Shu even more. Jiang Yingyao said, it's not that you gave her, it's that Jian Luo doesn't love you. Ning Shu sighed heavily again. Doesn't love her? If she doesn't love me, why did she become my fiancée? Do you know how long we've been together? It's been more than 10 years. Jiang Yingyao saw old Madame Jiang's expression and had a bad feeling. He immediately said, then we met first. We've known each other since we were 10 years old. Ning Shu said directly, but you only brought her harm. The Jiang family only brought her harm. I don't understand. They hurt you so much, but you still choose them. Ning Shu looked at Jian Luo sadly. Jian Luo couldn't say a word. Her mind was in a mess. Her heart was at a loss. Ning Shu finally said, I wish you all the best. I quit. Ning Shu turned and left. Old Madame Jiang frowned as she looked at her back. Her sparse eyebrows were knitted together. She looked very fierce. Old Madame Jiang looked back and forth between Jian Luo, Ning Shu, and Jiang Yingyao. She seemed to be thinking about something, and then her expression became more and more ugly. Ning Shu walked to the door and looked back at old Madame Jiang's constipated face. He knew that the old lady was imagining things. She was imagining things. It could only be said that imagination saved the world. Ning Shu left happily. As soon as Ning Shu left, old Madame Jiang said to her grandson with a pale face, come upstairs with me. I have something to say to you. Jiang Yingyao looked at Jian Luo. Jian Luo nodded thoughtfully and said, go ahead. But this made old Madame Jiang's expression even worse. She looked at Jian Luo even more unhappily. If she wanted to talk to her son, she had to get Jian Luo's permission. Her grandson was her. She didn't like an outsider controlling her grandson. Jian Luo was stared at by old Madame Jiang. She didn't know how she had offended her. Jian Luo couldn't help but feel sad. If she hadn't been hurt by bad people, if her father wasn't a murderer, and she was the daughter of a rich family. Today, she wouldn't have been humiliated for no reason. When she was young, she had lived a sad life. After meeting Fei Wen, although she was sad, she had never been humiliated like this and couldn't fight back. In those years, the people who were in contact with Fei Wen and her didn't know about her life. Jian Luo's body was cold. It was as if she had returned to when she was young. She was pointed at by people, whispered, and looked at with strange laughter. This feeling was really bad. It was very bad. She couldn't bear it. It was really painful. Jiang Yingyao held Jian Luo's hand and comforted her silently. He asked the maid to pour a glass of water for Jian Luo, and then followed old Madame Jiang upstairs. Old Madame Jiang raised the crutch in her hand and hit Jiang Yingyao hard. Jiang Yingyao grimaced in pain. He smiled and said, Grandma, don't be angry. Let me massage your shoulders. Old Madame Jiang sneered, don't try to curry favor. I won't let you marry her. Grandma, listen to me first. This is no longer a matter between the two of you. If you marry her, the entire Jiang family will be humiliated. Jiang Yingyao said with a headache, Grandma, what era are we in now? A person's body is made of skin and organs. Why label some organs as clean, or dirty and unclean? If the heart was hurt, then the heart would be dirty. Old Madame Jiang said, don't tell me this. You can't marry her. You don't care at all. I don't care. She didn't want to be hurt. Moreover, she did it to save me. Chapter 36-44. It was stupid to save you, but in that situation, what could a child like her do? What would the consequences be if she rushed up? Brainless. Old Madame Jiang saw her grandson's expression and softened her voice, but it was still very stiff. Besides, I made it up to her afterwards, but she ran away as if she was insulted. Jiang Yingyao covered his head and said with some pain, stop talking. He could completely imagine the pain Jian Luo suffered at that time. She was hurt and had to face the arrogant faces of the Jiang family. Old Madame Jiang was disappointed. Don't you think this is a conspiracy? Jiang Yingyao wiped his face and asked expressionlessly, what conspiracy? Old Madame Jiang was extremely disappointed with the men of the Jiang family. They were all obsessed with women, and all 3 generations were like this. If it weren't for the sake of carrying on the family line, old Madame Jiang would have castrated these men one by one. Women were all like this. Old Madame Jiang said, this woman is soft and weak, but she is very scheming. First, she used that bastard as a springboard. Knowing that he had no chance to inherit the Jiang family, she kicked him away and targeted you. Jiang Yingyao, I am just a small police officer now. Jiang Yingyao felt that his grandmother was really sick. She was too suspicious. It seemed that everyone in the world came for the Jiang family's money. Old Madame Jiang said, even if you are a public servant now, you are still a member of the Jiang family. You will definitely inherit the Jiang family in the future. Hurry up and resign and come back to manage the family. Otherwise, according to your father's temper, a group of bastards will come to snatch the Jiang family from you. Don't say that you don't care about the Jiang family. When those people take over the family, you will have no way to survive. Do you think you can survive with a small salary as a public servant? Jiang Yingyao, don't make people so anxious. Deliberately make people anxious. Old Madame Jiang said, and, Jiang Yingyao asked with some pain, and what? He felt that he was getting farther and farther away from Jian Luo. Should he consider leaving the Jiang family to be with Jian Luo? If he chose the Jiang family, he would not be able to be with Jian Luo, because his grandmother would not agree. The entire Jiang family, including the company's directors, would not agree. At this time, his marriage was no longer his own choice, but a community of interests. He felt like an ancient emperor. If he chose the Jiang family, he would have to give up Jian Luo. Madame Jiang, of course it has something to do with that bastard just now. Don't you think that Jian Luo and Fei Wen are conspiring against the Jiang family? Old Madame Jiang's face was serious. Jiang Yingyao felt even more pained. Where did that come from? He could not keep up with his grandmother's thoughts at all. Jian Luo hates the Jiang family, and that bastard Fei Wen wants to take back the Jiang family. The two of them will work together and use your feelings and guilt to take back the Jiang family. Old Madame Jiang could already predict what would happen in the future. Jiang Yingyao. That's not possible. What's impossible? Old Madame Jiang tapped her walking stick on the ground. Her grandson's nonchalant look made it seem as if he didn't notice the impending crisis at all. How foolish, then why are the two of them together? Fei Wen must have investigated the Jiang family and found out about Jian Luo's relationship with you. That's why he got together with Jian Luo. These two have been together for more than 10 years. I don't know what they are plotting. They are really ambitious. Whether it was because Jian Luo was vain and chose Jiang Yingyao and abandoned Fei Wen, or because there was a conspiracy between the two of them, old Madame Jiang would never agree to Jian Luo marrying into the Jiang family. Marrying her into the Jiang family would be marrying a scourge with evil intentions. Jiang Yingyao, he could not wake up his grandmother who was immersed in her fantasy. She insisted that Jian Luo was not good. Things had become more troublesome. It seemed that his grandmother would never agree to the two of them being together. What should he do? Jiang Yingyao now understood why that bastard Fei Wen was here. He was here to add fuel to the fire. As for the encounter between Jian Luo and Fei Wen, Jian Luo had already told him the whole story. Jian Luo and Fei Wen were definitely not together like what his grandmother thought. Their encounter should be completely accidental. It could only be said that it was a tangle of fate. Jian Luo was someone that his grandmother hated. Fei Wen was also someone that his grandmother hated. These two people were still in contact with each other, which would only make his grandmother hate them even more. Jiang Yingyao felt that he had not had a good day for more than 10 years after that incident. He finally met Jian Luo again. It was the same result again. It was so painful. Madame Jiang saw the struggle and choice on her grandson's face and was shocked. She said in shock, "That bastard is so vicious." "Jiang Yingyao, what's wrong now?" Madame Jiang looked at her ignorant grandson and was very anxious. "Fei Wen deliberately sent that woman to the Jiang family and let me know about his relationship with Jian Luo. He knew that I would not agree to the two of you being together. But if you insist on being with her, you will definitely make trouble with me. Maybe you will even leave the Jiang family in order to choose Jian Luo. This way, the board of directors will be very dissatisfied with you. The board of directors may object to you being the successor if he loves the beauty but not the country. This will give him an opportunity to take advantage of you. If you don't choose Jian Luo, you will be in pain for the rest of your life and live in guilt." Madame Jiang's face became uglier as she spoke. Anyway, the hole in her brain had already broken through the sky. In short, that bastard wants us to not have a peaceful life. So vicious. He was indeed a bastard with a vicious and dirty heart. Jiang Yingyao, he had nothing to say. Jiang Yingyao said with some anticipation, "Then Grandma, you will agree to let me marry Jian Luo and I won't have to leave the Jiang family. Isn't that good?" Madame Jiang immediately said, "That's impossible. How can I be willing to marry her when I know that she is a scourge? Dream on." Jiang Yingyao spread out his hands. "See, you fell into their trap." He was in a dilemma. Madame Jiang said, "Then it's good that you don't marry Jian Luo. Their conspiracy will not succeed." Jiang Yingyao, he could not continue this topic. He could not help but say, "Grandma, they are not what you think. You are silly. You may know a person for a long time but not his heart. Can you guarantee that Jian Luo still loves you after so many years? She hates the Jiang family and wants to take revenge on the Jiang family. It was because of the Jiang family that she left home." Jiang Yingyao took a deep breath. "Grandma, I don't want to talk." He turned and left the study and went downstairs. Jian Luo was sitting on the sofa downstairs, holding a teacup in her hand and drinking it. Very desolate, very lonely, and also very distressing. "Grandma, what did you say? Do you not agree to us being together?" Jian Luo asked carefully. Jiang Yingyao forced a smile. "Don't worry, I will solve it." Chapter 36-45. Although Jiang Yingyao had not found a solution, he would not give up on Jian Luo. The worst result would be to leave the Jiang family. All these years, he had survived without the Jiang family. The glory he had was not given to him by the Jiang family. The Jiang family gave him too much pressure. In this family, there was no loyalty. Money had become the capital of these people. His grandfather and father did not care about their wives at home and went to find women outside. His grandfather had an illegitimate son at his age. Jiang Yingyao felt annoyed when he thought of Fei Wen. He deliberately misled his grandmother to think that Jian Luo had bad intentions. Jiang Yingyao said to Jian Luo, "You don't have to feel guilty about Fei Wen anymore. Because of him, my grandmother has a bad impression of you. She thinks that you are colluding with each other to steal the Jiang family's property." Jian Luo quickly waved her hand and explained, "No, I have never thought of stealing the Jiang family's property. Fei Wen did not ask me to do so." She had never told Fei Wen about her past with the Jiang family. Fei Wen, on the other hand, was very secretive about her background. Only a few words were heard. Fei Wen said that her father had passed away, and her mother had remarried. When she learned that Fei Wen was Jiang Yingyao's uncle, she was also shocked and a little speechless. Why was her relationship with the Jiang family so messy? If they met again, it would be even more awkward. If Fei Wen returned to the Jiang family, they would meet frequently. However, according to the old lady's attitude, the chances of Fei Wen returning to the Jiang family were very small. The old lady hated him very much. Similarly, the old lady hated her very much. Jian Luo was a little tired. What should she do? She felt that the possibility of them being together was very small. There were too many obstacles. Jiang Yingyao held Jian Luo's hand and said firmly, "Don't worry, I will not let go of your hand this time." Jian Luo looked up and smiled at Jiang Yingyao. She nodded heavily, "I believe in you." Old Lady Jiang stood on the stairs and looked at Jian Luo and Jiang Yingyao. She gripped her walking stick tightly and her expression was very ugly. Jian Luo was like a rat that spoiled a pot of porridge. Whether he married her or not, there would be a disturbance for a while. In the end, who knew what would happen? Right now, Jiang Yingyao's feelings for Jian Luo were the strongest. Guilt and deep affection could make Jiang Yingyao make any decision. Old Madame Jiang also knew that she was going to die eventually. She was in control of the Jiang family now, but the Jiang family would eventually be handed over to the Jiang family. Of course, he would hand it over to his own grandson. As for that bastard son, he was just a useless good-for-nothing who was blinded by lust. When the time came, he would be sucked dry by other women. Old Madame Jiang cursed the men of the Jiang family in her heart. Although Jiang Yingyao seemed to be very affectionate, he was still blinded by lust. The difference between these three men was whether they were blinded by lust for one woman or multiple women. They were essentially the same. The genes of the Jiang family were really powerful. Was the Jiang family going to be finished? All of them used their lower bodies as their heads. As long as he agreed to the marriage between these two people, Jiang Yingyao naturally wouldn't cause any trouble. But old Madame Jiang couldn't bear it. She hated Jian Luo and felt that Jian Luo was plotting something. She had endured for most of her life, enduring her husband fooling around outside. In the end, when she was old, she had to move an annoying person back home. She couldn't bear it. Old Madame Jiang went downstairs with her walking stick. Jian Luo quickly let go of Jiang Yingyao's hand. She didn't dare to be too intimate with Jiang Yingyao in front of old Madame Jiang. It would make old Madame Jiang unhappy. There was no other way. Jian Luo now had to listen to old Madame Jiang. Old Madame Jiang said to Jian Luo, "Come here, I have something to say to you." Jiang Yingyao stood in front of Jian Luo and said directly, "Grandma, if you have something to say, just say it in front of me." Old Madame Jiang was very unhappy. It's a conversation between women. "Do you want to listen?" Jiang Yingyao said directly, "Why don't I listen?" "Grandma, don't tell me you want to give her a sum of money to send her away." "Grandma, this is such an old trick. You've used this trick more than 10 years ago." Old Madame Jiang's old face blushed, but she kept a straight face. "Do you think the Jiang family's money grows on trees? Do you think it's easy to give?" Jiang Yingyao was relieved. This was to remind Jian Luo, lest she couldn't deal with such a situation calmly and feel humiliated. He reminded her that if old Madame Jiang did this again, it would be a bit ridiculous. Old Madame Jiang would definitely not do something like throwing money at people again. Jiang Yingyao had been a public official for so long. He had faced many vicious criminals, but he still had a way to deal with old Madame Jiang. Besides, even if old Madame Jiang really did this, Jian Luo was already mentally prepared. Jian Luo followed old Madame Jiang upstairs. Old Madame Jiang was old and a little tired going up and down the stairs. She would stop to rest halfway. Jian Luo hesitated for a moment and reached out to help old Madame Jiang. Old Madame Jiang glanced at her and reached out to press her hand. She was like an arrogant empress dowager, accepting Jian Luo's flattery. She was willing to serve others as a maid, why wouldn't she accept it? Jian Luo was a little flattered. She thought that old Madame Jiang would ignore her, but she didn't expect her to help her up. Was this an improvement? She was really petty. Old Madame Jiang rolled her eyes in her heart. She served others, flattered others, and looked proud, as if it was a kindness. She was really a bitch. Of course, old Madame Jiang didn't treat Jian Luo well. It could even be regarded as contempt. Because she knew her place, seeing this woman still holding back her anger and flattering her, she must have some ulterior motive. Otherwise, why would she be bullied for no reason? As for her love for Jiang Yingyao, even if she loved him, she should have some brains. It was impossible for her to be so humble. At this moment, old Madame Jiang's mind thought a lot. Her children and grandchildren didn't live up to her expectations, so she could only put in more effort. Of course, Jian Luo didn't know that her simple action made old Madame Jiang's mind filled with all kinds of imagination. She did this and let herself be wronged for Jiang Yingyao, for the future of the two of them. Jian Luo seemed to be self-hypnotizing and was very touched. However, this kind of flattery was very unfamiliar and superficial. It let people know what she was thinking at a glance. After entering the study, Jian Luo carefully helped old Madame Jiang to sit down, and then she stood obediently. Old Madame Jiang pointed to the chair, "You sit down too." Did she have to raise her head and talk to her? Her neck was tired. Jian Luo's face was full of gratitude. She sat down, but half of her butt was on the chair. Her back was straight, like an obedient primary school student. Old Madame Jiang rolled her eyes in her heart. What kind of person was this? She just let her sit down and she was grateful. Chapter 36-46. Speaking of which, Jian Luo was a bit contradictory. People were all cheap and bullied the weak and feared the strong. For example, old Madame Jiang treated her badly and treated her like a servant, but she was still grateful. Fei Wen, the one who entrusted her, was so good to Jian Luo, but she only got an apology. Then she left with someone else with a clear conscience. Those who were good to her were cruel, but those who were bad to her, she was very forgiving. She was really drunk. Old Madame Jiang looked down on Jian Luo more and more. She was really petty, exuding a coy and petty aura. As the wife of the Jiang family, she could deal with all kinds of situations when she went out. Looking at her, what could she deal with? She looked for men when she had nothing to do. Men also had to work. If everything was waiting for men to deal with, then what was the point of men marrying women? It would increase their own burden. Men had responsibilities, and so did women. Everyone had their own duties and responsibilities. At this time, old Madame Jiang would rather Jiang Yingyao, her grandson, be like his grandfather and father, look for women outside than be so persistent with a woman. Old Madame Jiang looked at Jian Luo, making Jian Luo very nervous. She felt as if she was sitting on pins and needles, and her back was covered with dense fine sweat. After a while, old Madame Jiang said, I heard that you lived abroad with Fei Wen. Jian Luo nodded. Old Madame Jiang asked again, since you are engaged to him, why don't you get together naturally? Jian Luo was speechless. She really couldn't answer this question. Old Madame Jiang also did not expect her to give a damned answer. If she had to admit that she had taken advantage of him and then abandoned him, anyone with a bit of shame would not be able to say anything. But Jian Luo said, I love Jiang Yingyao. Old Madame Jiang. How shameless. Love. Old Madame Jiang felt that this kind of thing was very distant and empty. Hearing Jian Luo's words, her heart was full of ridicule. Old Madame Jiang said, since you love him so much, are you willing to do anything for him, as long as it's good for him? Jian Luo hesitated and nodded, of course I want him to be well. But because of you, he can't be well. Your father is a murderer. The daughter-in-law of the Jiang family can't be a girl from such a family. And because of what happened to you before, it was the Jiang family who paid to block the news, so your name didn't appear. However, just because it wasn't widely publicized doesn't mean that this matter doesn't exist. You know it in your heart, and so does the Jiang family. Jian Luo's face became extremely pale. Old Madame's words meant that she did not agree to them being together. Jian Luo said with a pained expression, but we really love each other. Old Madam, are you going to deny a person just because of their past? I also don't want to be hurt. I didn't mess around. I've always kept myself clean. Could it be that I was raped? Could it be that I'm worse than those girls who are willing to mess around? It was the same behavior. Should she be despised? Jian Luo felt that the world was gloomy. Her father was heartless and unscrupulous. He was a murderer and had even killed her own mother. And now, he had encountered such a thing. All the unbearable and tragic things in the world had happened to her. Madame Jiang said, since none of us want to face these things, why don't you separate from him? Why do you have to face it head-on and make everyone feel pain? What was there that couldn't be separated? Wasn't it better to choose someone else? Old Madame Jiang felt that not only was this woman's brain lacking, but she was also so despicable that she insisted on making herself and others feel uncomfortable. What was she trying to do? Was she plotting against the Jiang family? Jian Luo pleaded, Old Madam, can you let us be together? Old Madame Jiang shook her head. No. Do you think that I don't want you to be together simply because I don't like you? No, it's not. It's for his future. He became a public official. I let him be for a period of time. He's angry, but it's impossible for him not to inherit the Jiang family. But because of you, he may not be recognized by the board of directors. He will lose the right to inherit. Since you love him, you can see that he has nothing. Didn't you say that you can do anything for him? Can you do this? If you don't say or do, I doubt your feelings for him. Old Madame Jiang was attacking her with her own words. She didn't say that she loved him. She could do anything for his good. Why don't you do it? If you can't do it, it's not true love. It's fake and empty. Jian Luo was confused by old Madame Jiang's words, as if it was a big mistake for her not to break up with Jiang Yingyao. Being with Jiang Yingyao made her a bad person who harmed him. Can you do it? Old Madame Jiang looked at her. Jian Luo's mouth opened, but she couldn't say a word. She looked at Jian Luo in a daze. Old Madame Jiang said lightly, of course, as a reward, I will still give you some money. Jian Luo's face turned red. She was angry. She was insulted. Old Madam, my feelings for him have nothing to do with money. Jian Luo raised her chin slightly and said stubbornly. Old Madame Jiang was speechless. She rolled her eyes and said directly, I won't agree to the two of you getting married. Letting you leave him is to give you some humanitarian compensation. Logically speaking, it's fine if I don't give you money. As for whether you want the money or not, I won't let you enter the Jiang family. Why did she pretend to be righteous in front of her? Forget it. Jian Luo couldn't help but cry. Old madam, why can't you help us? Old Madam Jiang snorted. I can help you, but as long as you don't get married, you can do whatever you want. Jiang Yinyao's wife is not you. And I'll find a suitable wife for him. Jian Luo was petrified. What was the meaning of this? Was he going to make her an illegitimate mistress? It was really disgusting. Jian Luo couldn't help but say, Old madam, you're also a woman who was betrayed by your husband. How can you let him marry a woman he doesn't love and find another woman outside? We're all women. Why do we have to make things difficult for each other and make all three of us suffer? She dragged another woman into the water. Of course, with Jian Luo's self-esteem, she definitely didn't want to be a mistress. If she was content to be a mistress who couldn't see the light of day, why did she bother to apologize to old madam and curry favor with her? Wasn't it because she wanted to be together with Jiang Yingyao openly? Old Madame Jiang's face turned green. Her old face trembled. Obviously, Jian Luo had hit her sore spot. Besides, the pain of other women had nothing to do with her. As long as Jiang Yingyao's wife was a suitable wife for him, it was fine. Chapter 36-48. Anyway, in the end, whoever compromised and who suffered had nothing to do with him. She was completely out of it. She watched this group of people fight. Whether they were tired, bored, angry, loved or hated, it had nothing to do with her. The feeling of watching the fire burning across the river was wonderful. From Ning Shu's understanding of old Madame Jiang, this was a woman with a strong desire for control. Probably because of her husband's betrayal, she only trusted herself. Presumably, she would use all kinds of means to force Jiang Yingyao to compromise. Jiang Yingyao would probably have to go through both soft and hard methods. If Jiang Yingyao was a copper pea, he would naturally not compromise. But if it was a real pea, then it would definitely be soft. And just Jiang Yingyao being a copper pea was not enough. Jian Luo was also a copper pea. If one of the two compromised, this relationship would be in danger. It would not be able to last. Ning Shu shrugged and spread his hands. I'll quit. I wish you a happy life. Ning Shu was now busy with work, and the focus of his work was still overseas. The two decided to return to China because this country was their hometown. Even if something unpleasant happened here, they still wanted to come back. They wanted to come back and take a look. Their hometown was probably really ominous. So many things happened as soon as they came back. Besides, Ning Shu went to the Jiang family and poked old Madame Jiang's eyes. According to old Madame Jiang's personality, it would not be right if she did not do something to her. It was very likely that she would use the Jiang family's power and resources to trip her up. This was also a very normal thing. If she did not poke the old madam's eyes, the old madam would not care about her at all. Ning Shu did not care about this loss. His voice in the country was just a small matter. Previously, he planned to gradually transfer his business to the country if he wanted to settle down in the country. But looking at the situation, he should focus on overseas. Oh right, it was time to ask for Jian Luo's liquidated damages. If Jiang Yingyao really planned to leave the Jiang family and not rely on the Jiang family at all, it would be a burden for the two of them if they had to pay the liquidated damages. Jiang Yingyao had been a police officer all these years. Although his salary was not low, he did not make money from business. He did not know how much money he had accumulated. As for Jian Luo's money, after working for 2 or 3 years, she would at most have more than the average person, but it was impossible for her to have a lot more. When Jian Luo first joined the company, in order to prevent others from saying that she got in through the back door, she took the initiative to ask for the same salary as the other designers in the company. If her ideas and designs were adopted by the company, she would receive a bonus. Ning Shu didn't believe that he had a lot of money. If that was the case, then she would be the first to hit him when he was down. Money wasn't everything. You couldn't do anything without money. A single penny stumped a hero. Ning Shu asked his secretary to urge the lawyer to hurry up and get the liquidated damages back as soon as possible. The secretary looked at Ning Shu with pity. She felt that Ning Shu was in such a hurry because he wanted to see his fiancée and win her back. Ning Shu was speechless. Could this joke ever pass? She really, purely, just wanted to get some money from Jian Luo to make up for her previous losses. Ning Shu said to the secretary with a cold face, "Don't call her over. I don't want to see her. Just send the money over." Ning Shu looked at the secretary's subtle expression and said with a headache, "Don't try to be smart." Did she think that she would use this method just to see Jian Luo? She was thinking too much. The secretary nodded. "I see." But Ning Shu was still relieved too early. A few days later, when Jian Luo appeared in front of Ning Shu couldn't help but cover his head. Ning Shu was too lazy to argue with Jian Luo. He had argued too much before and now he had nothing to say to Jian Luo. Ning Shu said, "Put down the money and leave." Jian Luo asked Ning Shu with resentment, "When did you do it on purpose?" "That day." "Oh, you mean the day I met your parents. I just wanted you to know that what I told you before was true. It's not that easy between you and Jiang Yingyao. It turns out that I was right." Jian Luo was also mentally and physically exhausted. She was touched by what Jiang Yingyao had done for her, but she also knew that it was unfair to Jiang Yingyao if the stalemate continued. The two returned to the hotel and Jian Luo moved to Jiang Yingyao's house. This house was rented by Jiang Yingyao. Logically speaking, if Jiang Yingyao took the Jiang family's money, he could buy more than 10 houses like this in minutes without blinking an eye. But after Jiang Yingyao started working, he didn't take the Jiang family's money. This bachelor apartment was a little crowded with one more person. And Jiang Yingyao was usually very busy with work. When he was busy, he would directly rest at the station. The two of them tidied up the house properly and decorated it very warmly. At this time, she suddenly received a message from the company's lawyer, asking her to pay the liquidated damages or go to court. Jian Luo saw this amount. If it was normal times, she could pay it, but she braced herself to buy an expensive gift for Madame Jiang and spent a lot of money. At this time, another bill came, which really made Jian Luo feel a little strained. When Jiang Yingyao heard this news, he frowned. In a situation like this, it could be considered a big deal, but it could also be considered a small matter. In this case, if the other party insisted on pursuing her, he couldn't outlast the company. Moreover, he could just withdraw his resignation letter and say that he wouldn't resign. The problem would be solved. Jiang Yingyao and Jian Luo both agreed that this was Ning Shu's way of keeping Jian Luo. Jiang Yingyao decided on the spot that he would give the money and use this money to end things completely. For Jiang Yingyao, it was good for his love rival to do this. It was best to use money to end things. He was afraid that the other party's attitude would be sticky and distant, which would make him unhappy. Since the other party was so ruthless, it was better for them to end things completely. And Jian Luo wouldn't have to feel guilty. Jian Luo didn't have much money. Jiang Yingyao gave all the money he had saved over the years to Jian Luo. He directly gave the passbook to Jian Luo and said that all the money in the house would be given to Jian Luo in the future. Jian Luo had a shy smile on her face. When she arrived at the company, Jian Luo thought that she would see a gloomy or decadent Fei Wen. But she didn't expect that he didn't seem to be affected at all. He was still the same as before. And when he looked at her, he had a faint smile on his face. The only thing missing was the words, "watching a show," written on his face. Jian Luo was angry. What was this? How could he be so sure that there was no future between her and Jiang Yingyao? She would definitely live a good life with Jiang Yingyao. The more others wanted to laugh at her, the better she would live. Jian Luo put the card on the table. The money is here. The password is your birthday. Ning Shu nodded and casually threw the card into the drawer. You can go now. Chapter 3649. The password should have been 1234567889. Why did he have to use a birthday number? What was he trying to do? Some of Jian Luo's actions made people speechless, and there was a vague hint. If it was the client, who knew how they would feel when they heard something like, the password is your birthday? He would probably be hurt again. Jian Luo frowned when she saw Ning Shu deal with the bank card so casually. She and Jiang Yingyao pooled the money together. But it was thrown away so casually and carelessly, which made Jian Luo's heart hurt. The money was Jiang Yingyao's salary. He had saved it. Jian Luo was very unhappy to be looked down upon. You, Ning Shu looked at Jian Luo's expression and understood her thoughts. He said directly, the money is mine now. I can do whatever I want with it. Did he want to carry it with him or put it on the altar and burn 3 incense sticks a day? Maybe Jian Luo thought that others should cherish her things. Especially a man like him who loved Jian Luo so much, he had to be careful. Jian Luo didn't know that she had such a secret thought, but Ning Shu pointed it out. She was so embarrassed that she turned and left. Ning Shu wrote, agree, on her resignation letter and stopped Jian Luo. Jian Luo turned around and asked coldly, what else? Ning Shu pushed the resignation letter. This is yours. Take it away. Jian Luo walked back and saw the resignation letter. She was angry and regretful. She had spent so much money to buy such a piece of paper. No, to be precise, she had bought it. Jian Luo's values were a little shaky at this moment. Since you've paid, then it's settled. Also, don't leak the company's design ideas. Otherwise, there will be lawyers coming. Jian Luo took the resignation letter and took a deep breath. Don't worry. I won't do such a thing. Such a despicable thing, copying the company's design, was not something she would do. Moreover, Jian Luo was very confident in her talent. Many of the company's ideas were designed by her. There was no need for her to copy. When she went to work in other companies in the future, she must design her own unique style. Ning Shu nodded. As long as you understand. Jian Luo took the resignation letter and returned to the company. She raised the resignation letter in her hand. Her bright eyes shone through the paper with a yellow luster, and the handwriting on it was also dyed yellow. For some reason, he felt incomparably relaxed, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Furthermore, his relationship with Fei Wen could be severed. A new Jian Luo was born, and there was no need for her to be with another man with guilt. Ning Shu stood at the window of the office. Through the window, he saw Jian Luo standing at the door of the company. He snorted. The money and effort he had spent for more than 10 years could be understood by a mere few tens of thousands of yuan. Wasn't Jian Luo too optimistic? He felt that other people's money was not money, and other people's time was not time. It was probably because the psychological counseling was too successful that Jian Luo exposed her own scars and got together with Jiang Yingyao. Jiang Yingyao had witnessed Jian Luo's tragic times. When she was young, she was ostracized by others. Jiang Yingyao had witnessed it all and was the only one who had gotten close to her. Jiang Yingyao was also the one who had witnessed her being hurt by bad people. So many dark histories had been witnessed by Jiang Yingyao. In front of him, it was as if she had been stripped naked, and her most unbearable side was exposed. Didn't Jian Luo feel uncomfortable? Normal people would avoid people who knew about their dark histories. They would rather kill them to silence them, but Jian Luo took the initiative to get close to him. He couldn't figure it out. Jian Luo tore the resignation letter and threw it directly into the trash can by the roadside. She stepped lightly into the taxi. Next, Jian Luo would start to look for a job. The two of them had to work hard for this small family. When Jiang Yingyao heard that Jian Luo was going out to look for a job, he did not object and was very supportive. After being a police officer for so many years, he did not have the habits of those rich young masters. It was definitely a shameful thing to let his wife go out to work. Moreover, Jian Luo was lucky to have studied design. Her talent could not be wasted. Moreover, Jiang Yingyao felt that his working hours were very uncertain. It was very likely that he would have to work in the middle of the night. If there was a major case, he might not be home for a few days. If Jian Luo had her own job, she would not have to stay at home and feel lonely. With Jiang Yingyao's support, Jian Luo was very happy. Jiang Yingyao was definitely different from other men. Now the two of them had to worry about daily necessities. Jian Luo took her resume and started to interview with the company. Her resume was very beautiful, including the years of design and learning design from a certain master. There was also a design competition won. Looking at this resume, it made people feel that this was a rising star in the design world. However, she was rejected by the company's interviewer, saying that Miss Jian's ability was very good, but the company had already recruited the person they wanted. There were also interviewers with extraordinary backgrounds, saying that she was not a student of a certain master. At least, that master did not admit it. Jian Luo felt that she was insulted, but suddenly thought of what Fei Wen said. From today onwards, she could not use his connections and resources. However, it was a fact that she had learned from a master. Did she have to deny this? The interviewer's impression of Jian Luo was not very good. She used other people's names to swindle others. After interviewing for several companies, they were all like this. They did not want her for various reasons. After a few days of job hunting, Jian Luo was very tired, but she did not tell Jiang Yingyao. In Jian Luo's heart, she was a talented designer. There was no situation where she could not find a job. If she told Jiang Yingyao, it would be a very embarrassing thing. Although Jian Luo hid it very well, when Jiang Yingyao asked at the dinner table, Jian Luo said that she was still looking and was not very satisfied with the salary. Or she was not satisfied with the work environment. Jiang Yingyao was a police officer. The work of investigating a case required enough observation. When dealing with criminals, a slight expression could betray one's true feelings. Jian Luo's various actions told Jiang Yingyao that she was lying. She desperately wanted to change the topic. Jiang Yingyao put down his chopsticks and asked, "What's the matter? Did something happen?" Jian Luo looked at his gaze and could not go on. She told him what happened and finally leaned on the chair wearily. "I think I'm very useless." Jian Luo had never encountered such a thing. Even when she was mocked when she was young, she was not so frustrated. That was because of her father. This time, it was indeed because of her own strength. The strength that she was proud of was questioned and ignored. Her self-esteem could not stand it. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.